Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, and Dalton Wasserman here with you guys to recap everything that we saw from Week 17. Dalton, it was a long one. It was started on Wednesday. We got 2 games, a Thursday game, Saturday games, Sunday. We even still got 1 to go this week on Monday. So obviously all the games in Week 17 minus Monday Night Football. Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
Fantastic. I think, like you mentioned, a long weekend, another good weekend, a holiday weekend. And I'll tell you what sticks out to me about this weekend? We're getting the culmination of just an incredible rookie class. It feels like every single game we turn on, we've got a rookie playing at a special level, whether it's offense or defense. I think this is going to end up being one of the better draft classes we've seen in recent times. And it started on Wednesday, and it went all the way through last night's game down to the absolute wire. I just think that's what I'm seeing here. It feels like we're about to talk about a rookie in almost every single game, and it's been fantastic to watch.
The future is in great hands in this league. And we talked about the last draft being a really special one, and it's really turning out to be the case. But so is the present. It's special in the present as well because, man, we got a lot of games to talk about here. Obviously, with this being the grades release show, we will give you the PFF grades, the top 5 grades for every single team as we go through every single game. We're going to talk about everything that was on the line here. Playoff seeding, draft implications, what scenarios we have going into the final week of the season. We'll talk a little bit about how these performances may have impacted the end of year awards for some of these players. So there's a lot of fantastic stuff to get to. But we start as we always do with Sunday Night Football. Yes, everybody watching this, we will get to the Christmas Day games, the Thursday games. We'll recap those a little bit once we get to the end of the show. But we got to start with what's fresh, and that is Sunday Night Football. It was a thriller. Michael Penix, trying to keep the Falcons in the driver's seat for the NFC South and the playoffs. Jaden Daniels, obviously they cannot win the division anymore in the NFC East, but still want to get themselves the best seed they can going into the playoffs, and took us to overtime. So anytime that's the case, it's always very entertaining. Washington comes away with the victory, 30-24. Atlanta didn't even touch the ball in overtime. I hate that, but perhaps we can get into that conversation in a little bit. Let's get the top 5 players for the Washington Commanders before we get into all the good stuff. Wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus, 84.2 overall grade in this one. He's having a fantastic second half of the season. Been a lot of fun to watch. Linebacker Bobby Wagner. Dalton, you pointed this out throughout the season. It feels the ageless one. It feels like is what we need to be calling him because of how well he is still playing at his age, at this late in his career. As the athleticism started to drop and coverage grade kind of started to drop a little bit, people wondered if it was it for Bobby Wagner and how efficient he could be. But man, he has still been a great piece of this Washington Commanders defense. Guard Sam Cosmi with a 75.1. Number 3 defensive tackle John Allen a 73.8, and offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas a 71.5. Jaden Daniels played hero last night once again, 82.2 overall grade. Then on Atlanta's side of things, Bijan Robinson, the top graded player for the Falcons with an 82.1. Wide receiver Drake London an 81.3. Offensive tackle Jake Matthews a 76.5. Offensive tackle Caleb McGarry a 73.1. Tight end Kyle Pitts a 75.2, and then Michael Penix in this game. I know we'll get to a lot of ups and downs from him. 53.0 was the overall PFF grade that we gave him here in this one. What was your stat that told the story here for this game, Dalton?
So I like that you mentioned that the Falcons didn't touch the ball in overtime because they hardly touched the ball in the second half of this game at all. You look at the second half time of possession. The Commanders had the ball for 28 minutes and 17 seconds, and the Falcons had it for 9 minutes and 1 second. Total play count, 53-24 for Washington. And the big thing is Washington ran the ball really well in the second half. Now, a lot of it was Jaden Daniels, some design runs, some scrambles, but they ran the ball well. They found a way to get first downs. And the idea of it, I think they went into halftime and said, look, we're behind by 10. We cannot let Bijan Robinson take this game over like we did in the first half, right? Bijan had 15 touches in the first half, was absolutely killing them on the ground, had 2 touchdowns, only 5 touches for him in the second half. Not many touches for anybody for the Falcons because they never had the football. I think Washington, in their best stretches this year, they've gone to ball control. They've run the ball well. They've had balance on offense. And the craziest part to me is they scored 30 points in this game. Trevor, during this 4-game win streak that they're on, they have the lowest explosive pass rate in the NFL. They're not throwing the ball downfield. Terry McLaurin had 1 catch in this game, and yet they found a way to ball control their way back into this game. It was a slow grind, even in overtime with a drive that was, over 7 minutes of game time, and they finished it off with the touchdown. I mean, that's what it was. They went in and they said, look, we're behind, but we can't get away from what we do well. We have to control the clock. We can't let Bijan Robinson take this game over. We have to make Michael Penix beat us. Now, he did tie the game with an absolutely brilliant throw down the seam, but I like that Washington stuck with the approach in overtime as well. Control the ball, run the ball, just get first downs and methodically work your way down the field. Hell, it's worked for a team like the Chiefs all year. Why can't it work for Washington? And they just controlled the ball for the entire second half of this game.
Yeah, it feels like Washington's playing close to the best brand of football they could play going into the playoffs, which I think is a really great feeling, especially when you have a quarterback like Jaden Daniels. Who knows what could happen? An upset in the first round, second round, wherever it is for the Commanders. I think you got to feel good about where they are, certainly in year one of this regime, year one of Jaden Daniels. And so I think that this was another game that gives them a lot of confidence going into last week of the season and into the playoffs. I do want to talk about Michael Penix, and I'm going to wrap up my stat that told the story and my most impressive sort of in one, because it tells the story, I think, the way that we need to here with Michael Penix. I'll start with most impressive, and it's Michael Penix throws on fourth down there in that fourth quarter. It was not just the touchdown to Kyle Pitts, which I thought was an excellent throw to him on that 4th and 13 situation where it was 4th and goal, game's on the line, you complete it, you tie the game up, you don't, the game is over. There it is, all the pressure right there. But even before that, the 4th and 11, okay, maybe the situation wasn't as dire. You had a couple of timeouts to you, so that was okay. But we'll get to the timeouts in a second. 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock. It was 4th and 11, and he still fires a very accurate pass, albeit to an open Drake London. I think the play design was very nice by Zach Robinson there to get him open against that type of coverage, but was able to complete that pass right there. So I was really impressed with back against the wall, fourth quarter on the road, Michael Penix. He completed those 2 big fourth down passes, one of them being the touchdown that ended up tying up the game. You got to feel really good about that if you're a Falcons fan. I know that it stings because now you've relinquished control of the division to the Buccaneers and you no longer control your own destiny in that regard. But this season, you felt like it was sort of a building block anyways. It wasn't supposed to be going into the year. It was supposed to be maybe your division to lose. But when Kirk Cousins started playing the way that unfortunately he did, it felt like that wasn't going to be the case. So to me, the more important thing is how Michael Penix looks in this one. Those 2 throws on fourth down shows me that clutch gene, shows me that he has the ability to step up in those big moments like we saw him do so many times at Washington over the last 2 years. And then my stat that told the story here was once again Michael Penix, but it was the adjusted completion percentage. For as much as I praise him for those 2 fourth down throws that he made, there were too many throws that he missed. 55.9% adjusted completion percentage, and there were just too many throws that hit the ground, went over a receiver's head, didn't really give his guys a chance to make something happen. That adjusted completion percentage, just for reference for everybody, normally that's somewhere around, low to mid 70s. If you're a really great quarterback, really accurate, you're kind of high 70s, maybe even low 80s, right around 80%. 55.9 of an adjusted completion percentage is not going to win you many football games in this league. So where I loved the couple of throws when his back was against the wall to showcase what he could be moving forward, the reason why they did not win this football game is because he wasn't good enough on a down-to-down basis when it came to completing those passes and giving his wide receivers a chance. So that's what I thought about Michael Penix with my stat that told the story and most impressive there.
Yeah, no, and I think you're going to get that out of a guy who's making his second career start and late in the season when he didn't get many reps with the ones all year in practice.
Exactly.
And I thought there were times, too, where you saw some of that miscommunication. The first interception, for sure, early in the game, we saw sort of, I think him and the receiver saw 2 different things in coverage. I think you have a guy that, 1, is still a rookie making his second start, and 2, is figuring out the chemistry and how to play with all these guys on the fly in the middle of a playoff chase. So, I think it was up and down for sure from Penix, and I think still even through this and the grading and all of that, I think we've seen through 2 starts. 1, he looks like he feels like he belongs on the football field, right? He looks comfortable even though he's missing some throws, and man, he can make every single throw on the field. When his feet are set in the pocket, he can absolutely rip them outside the numbers, sideline to sideline. Anywhere you need the ball to go, Penix can get it there, and I'm really actually excited to see him try to bounce back next week against Carolina with still a lot to play for. Look, we all are going to assume the Bucs are going to beat the Saints, but you can never assume anything. We saw that with some other teams yesterday as well, so I think with a lot still to play for, him to bounce back against a defense like Carolina, this was going to be a tough environment to win anyway. The Washington, that stadium was just jacked up for them. It's their best season they've had in over 30 years. Jaden Daniels doing what he does, and Penix, I still give him a lot of credit for going down and tying the game. He just never got a shot to have the ball in overtime. So Up and down for sure, but my most impressive look, I said it last week, Jaden Daniels in the clutch, it's just unreal at this point. I mean, you're talking about, you look at his stats in this game, fourth quarter and overtime, 86.2 passing grade, 80.4 rushing grade, 7-10 with 72 and a big-time throw through the air, 8 carries, 51 yards, 6 forced missed tackles on 8 carries. I mean, he just decided at this point, especially with Penix tying the game late, he had to put this team on his back, and he's done it several times this year. You know, we've seen there was a comeback earlier in the year against the Giants, a game-winning drive. There was the Hail Mary. There was last week against Philly. This week now, I mean, he is just the heart and soul and everything of this team, especially when it matters most. In the design run game, outside of him, the running backs weren't fantastic in this game. Again, Terry McLaurin, A.J. Terrell shut him down, and Terry McLaurin was not getting open in man-to-man in this game. He had to find other guys. They haven't been creating a ton of deep passes lately, even during this 4-game win streak, but he's managing the game. He's getting first downs, and honestly, I think the last 2 weeks he's just taken just a do-whatever-it-takes mentality. And in the fourth quarter and overtime this season, third in overall grade behind Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, second in passing grade behind Burrow. There have not been many quarterbacks better in the clutch than Jaden Daniels, and I know obviously clutch isn't always something we can quantifiably measure. It's kind of hard, right? But you can see he's the heart and soul of this team, and he has been all season, and he is the number one reason that they're going to the playoffs.
Let's get to your most disappointing, because I do want to have the timeout discussion with Raheem Morris, and I think it's a bigger conversation that I'll talk about with most disappointing. But who is your most disappointing here before we get to that?
It's just in general, outside of A.J. Terrell, who I mentioned had a really good game, the rest of the Falcons coverage unit, you know, lately we've talked about the last few weeks, they have found a pass rush. 4 of their 6 highest graded pass rush games have come in the last 4 weeks. After, 11, 12 weeks of not having a pass rush. Now the Falcons have it, and the coverage fell apart. They've lost 5 of their last 7 games. In those 5 games, their coverage grade is 48.9. Guys like D. Alford, Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates, we finally, we spent all season crying that they didn't have a pass rush. They get a pass rush, now the coverage falls apart. It fell apart when they really needed it not to in this game. They just couldn't find any answers, to not give up first downs, especially late in the game. I just think at this point we're looking at a Falcons defense. To me, that's actually the biggest reason they lost this game. I know Penix had to manage and battle through some inaccuracy, but I don't think we've seen a single game this year, maybe the Charger game, and they lost that game anyway, and they forced a bunch of turnovers, right? But they have not put together a complete defensive effort at all 3 levels, I don't think, in any game this season, and this was, again, the case. And they finally got a pass rush. They got 5 sacks on Daniels, but they just couldn't cover on the back end.
My most disappointing has to do with Raheem Morris and the timeouts, but it's kind of more than that. So in this situation, Raheem Morris doesn't call the timeouts near the end of the first half, which I think a lot of people criticize there, but it's really the second half, not used to that one timeout where they complete a pass, they get the ball at their own 45-yard line, so not quite at the 50, but almost at the 50-yard line. There's 34 seconds left. There's 34 seconds left when they could have called that timeout. I think the ball was technically completed with 35 seconds left. But if you get that timeout in very quickly, you're going to have 34 seconds left on the clock. They've got 2 timeouts at that point. 2, not even 1. It's not like this is their lone timeout. They've got 2 timeouts. They opt to not call one and let 17, 18 seconds burn off the clock before an incompletion. I don't understand why you're doing this. I don't understand how we're not, how do you not have a coach or somebody next to you that right before the drive begins, you go, hey, by the way, we've got 2 timeouts. I mean, I feel like an overall framework. Now, situations are not this cut and dry, but an overall framework is if you have 3 timeouts left and you have 3 timeouts to operate with when you're operating a 2-minute drill or whatever, you got to get in the end zone, you got to score. You call a timeout at the 1-minute mark, right? I think that could be a landmark for you. Now, again, it doesn't have to be that. Depending on how the game's going, you can kind of get around that. Or, if you ran the ball, if it was an incompletion, whatever, you can call one at the 1-minute mark. You call one at the 30-second mark. And then you have the 30 seconds to get comfortable with having that last timeout. If you have 2 timeouts left, the 30-second, the 30-second, I mean, this should be a very, very clear and obvious call the timeout. And after the game, Raheem Morris said, well, I was hoping that we would go a little bit faster there. I thought the Falcons went pretty quick, right? I mean, it wasn't like a spike type of a thing. You know that you have to get a play in, you're running a play, but understanding that they had to get a play in, he had to communicate that, they had to get lined up, they had to get the ball snapped. 17 seconds ain't that slow. That's basically what it would have been anyways. You had all of that time run off the clock just for no reason. You know, a head coach is not really like a one-size-fits-all. I know there's not an exact blueprint to a great head coach, but the more we have these conversations, the more I watch some of these clock management and timeout and just like in-game blunders from some of these coaches. And then also, we're going to talk about this as the show goes on, a lot of culture stuff with a lot of these teams just going sour and not being able to manage the roster and get the roster motivated and have them, focused at all times, no matter what the record is, no matter what the situation is. The more I feel like I don't even care about what kind of a coordinator this coach was. Obviously, if you want him to call plays, you think about that. But I'm not just using this because it's a Buccaneer example. I think about what Bruce Arians was for the Buccaneers. And there's a lot of things that made that situation right. And Bruce didn't always handle timeouts correctly. I understand that too. But Bruce Arians was a CEO type of head coach. He commanded respect out of the entire coaching staff and the entire roster every week at any point in the season or the offseason. He understood how to build that culture and command that respect. And then I felt like he was able to make some good decision when it came to clock management, time management, things like that. Not that it was perfect. I'm not trying to say that it was, but the more that we do this, the more I just feel as though that type of a head coach is actually the ones that we should be prioritizing, not necessarily the ones that are the great play callers like it feels like we obviously do. But, having a CEO head coach is less quantifiable. It's much more difficult to manage than it is, this guy called good plays for a good offense or a good defense or something like that. But last night was just another frustrating example of these head coaches, these coaches in the NFL, they are so smart. These dudes are so smart. They know football so well. And yet week after week, year after year, they just cannot get timeouts right. It's just so frustrating. And I felt like it could have very well cost the Falcons last night.
Yeah, no, I think it did, honestly. I think you're talking about a scenario where you still have to know, with the long completion and 33, 34 seconds left when I believe it was Darnell Mooney went down there. You just, there is almost a simple part of it where you have to understand, even if you're trying to run a play, the natural amount of time it takes to run. It's going to take 15 seconds for everybody to get back, get lined up, get a play call in. And even so, like you mentioned, the players executed it pretty well as far as the timing, but that's the problem is with 2 timeouts in your pocket, understanding, that 15 seconds that we could have saved, that's at least 2 more plays, if not 3, right? And then you're sitting there as a consequence settling for a 56-yard field goal, which you were kind of lucky to get into anyway with the penalty. But no, I'm with you. I think, look, situational football is everything in the NFL. In a league where 60 to 65% of games are decided by one score, it's everything. It's very rare. There's only a handful of games a year where teams walk out there and they only just win because they're more talented, right? Situationals, they talk about it all the time. Third down, red zone, we talk about every week with somebody here. Clock management, timeout management, all of that stuff, it all matters. And you could make one mistake. That's how thin the margin of error is in the NFL, especially between 2 teams that are this even. So I think it was a costly mistake not calling the timeout there. If you have 34 seconds at your own 45-yard line, I should say, somewhere around there, and 1 timeout still to go, that's a lot of plays you can run in that time frame, especially with the middle of the field open, and could have earned your way to something way easier than a 56-yarder.
Yep, I agree with you. Let's stay in the NFC South. Let's talk about the Panthers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers win this one by a big score, 48-14. And with the Falcons loss, now the Buccaneers are in the driver's seat. Now they control their own destiny for the NFC South and for the playoffs. Top 5 graded Buccaneers in this game. Wide receiver Mike Evans at the top of the list. Another big game for him. 97 receiving yards, or was it 97, 93, something in the 90s? 97. Yeah, I don't know why 93 was all of a sudden in my head, but it was 97. I was right the first time. He had an 87.7 overall grade in this one. Now just 85 yards short of a 1,000-yard season, which we'll talk about here in a second. Tight end Payne Durham with an 85.1. Running back Bucky Irving is 78.8. Edge rusher Yaya Diaby is 78.5. And Luke Gedeke with a 73.1. Baker Mayfield in this game, the highest graded player at a 90.5. On Carolina's side of things, wide receiver Adam Thielen with an 82.1. Defensive tackle Deshaun Williams with an 81.4. Safety Damani Richardson at a 73.3. Cornerback Mike Jackson a 71.4. And then defensive tackle Shai Tuttle a 68.8. Bryce Young, an 80.3 overall grade in this one. What was your stat that told the story here, Dalton?
You're going to hate me bringing out all the positive stuff on this one because it's, there's a decent chance you could lose him in the offseason. But I got to talk about Liam Cohen. You I know.
You ain't keeping anything under wraps. Unfortunately,
Okay.
people very much know what Liam Cohen is doing down in Tampa, so I can't even hate you for it.
Good. If they're already aware, then I feel free saying everything I'm about to.
I'm going to say something about it, so if that makes you feel better, go ahead.
Okay, good. Then if you're on board, then we're fine then. Okay, yep. Future head coach Liam Cohen. Look, there's a few elements of this offense I want to get into because it's an absolute nightmare to defend right now with the way he's calling it. One, season high 49 plays with motion involved in this game. The further we get into the season, and I thought he was doing a great job of it earlier in the season of creating matchups, especially with the receivers in motion, he's just leaning more and more into it, and you never know how the Bucs are going to line up. And even the personnel, sometimes you get both backs on the field. You get Jalen McMillan in the backfield running routes from the backfield. You got motion all over the place. We're creating matchups for Mike Evans. 11 of their 18 explosive plays in this game came on a play with motion, so that's one. Two, there has been a fundamental shift in their run game. Okay, Liam Cohen, kind of known under Sean McVay, and even going back to his days as the OC at Kentucky, a lot of zone runs, a lot of outside zone runs. We kind of went with more of the Shanahan sort of scheme. The Bucs have changed to a gap scheme running team late in the season. Since week 10, third most gap scheme runs in the league behind the Eagles and the Colts. They're getting downhill. They're pulling these guards. They're moving Graham Barton around. They're getting on the second level very quickly, and I'll get into why that matters in a minute. But 123 of their 202 rushing yards in this game on gap schemes with a 91.1 rushing grade. So Bucky and Rachaad White and even Sean Tucker really comfortable behind this. And then working off of that, 166 yards in this game on play action, the most of the season. I mean, just an unreal combination of gap scheme, using the offensive line. You got an athletic offensive line. I mean, a really athletic offensive line down here in Tampa. Tristan Wirfs, Graham Barton's a good athlete. Cody Mauch's coming on the second half of the season. Luke Gedeke, you saw in the top five. I mean, they have got athletes up front. They're getting on the second level. And what that has done, the combination of all of those things, the motion, the gap schemes where linebackers are reading the offensive linemen, right? And the play action. Linebackers against Tampa Bay this year have a 45.5 grade this season. That's the lowest in the NFL. It is up. The more I'm watching, and I know this is the Carolina Panthers, but this has been all year with the Bucs. The more I watch their offense, it is a nightmare for linebackers. An absolute nightmare because you don't know which way everything's going. Now they're putting in influence runs where the O-line will run counter one way and they hand it to Bucky just in a bunch of space off to the side. The play action game is just perfect, especially over the middle of the field. Everything that they do, just like I think the Lions do the same thing, right? We've talked about this before. It stresses the living hell out of linebackers. And I'd be curious to see if they were to play, say, a Philadelphia again, with as well as Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean have played, if they could even fool those guys. Because the more I watch this offense, I don't even know how you play linebacker against it. There is so much going on. You see so many false steps taking. Trev, there were reps in this game when the Bucs ran play action. There was linebackers like falling over. I mean, it was like that. And I know, again, not every team is the Panthers, and they have maybe the worst defense in football, but I have no idea as a linebacker how you keep up with everything the Bucs are doing, and Liam Cohen's just doing a spectacular job of stacking this offense together.
Yeah, the boss man, Chris Collinsworth, pointed out the Washington Commanders doing the same thing in the run game where they're running, power, they're running counter to the right, and then they're just handing the ball off to Brian Robinson. He's running directly to the left, and it's so difficult for linebackers. I mean, a lot of what offensive coordinators are doing is meant to put the linebackers in conflict because it's so difficult to be a linebacker in the NFL and do your job perfectly because you just have so many things on your plate. There's a reason for the harsh splits. Well, I shouldn't say harsh. I should say beneficial splits of man and gap scheme called plays versus zone blocking scheme. And I think that that's good job by Liam Cohen just identifying what this team really does well, because at the beginning of the season, they were running sort of splits. It was sort of an even split. They were kind of trying to figure out what they did best, but a lot of times they were trying to do that with each individual back. They were running more power and gap concept with Bucky Irving, and then they were trying to do more of the zone thing with Rachaad White. And I don't remember exactly what the cutoff point was, 5, 6, 7 weeks into the season. They're sort of looking at things and they're going, man, Bucky's rushing grades are much better than Rachaad's. And obviously I think that Bucky is a more talented runner than Rachaad is. But I think they looked at the situation. They said, our offensive line is just way better between the trenches. It's way better between the tackles. It's made much better with pulling offensive linemen and running different man blocking concepts. And so they have leaned into that heavily. So I think that's a great job by Liam Cohen understanding what his offensive line does best. And now both of these backs are running a lot behind those types of blocking concepts, and it's obviously something that's really benefited them. Bucks EPA per play is just something that I also wanted to shout out, because the offense overall is what I was going to say was the stat that told the story. 0.397 EPA per play. That was first in the NFL this week. The only team that had a higher EPA per play was the Baltimore Ravens in their blowout win over the Houston Texans, where it felt like they could not stop them at all whatsoever. So this is just another showcase of, man, this offense is humming. And getting to my most disappointing, as we sort of get into most disappointing and most impressive in this one, what holds the Bucs back from being a really legitimate playoff team? Now, I'm not saying that they can't win a playoff game. I am. I think the offense is clicking in a way where they can win a playoff game, especially if they're winning the division and they are hosting here. But the blown coverages, the defense, it continues to be an issue for this team. Going into the half, Todd Bowles even said to, I cannot remember who was talking with him at halftime. He said, quote, DBs need to get their heads out of their ass going into halftime. And I mean, he was correct. I mean, there were instances where I think that you saw that in the first half, the touchdown over the middle where Jamel Dean is playing in quarters. And it's just, he is so late on that play to recognize what the threat was going to be on that passing play. I mean, that's just one thing where you've got to have way better awareness than that. And he was it wasn't just a step behind, he was 2 steps behind, making that touchdown way too easy. And then the other bomb up the middle, Tyke Smith and Jordan Whitehead are just kind of staring at the receiver as he splits both of them and gets it open into the end zone. Nobody really turning to make a play on the football. So I think that sort of goes into it. If you're a Bucs fan, that's what the worry is going into the playoffs, is can the defense sort of snap back into shape and really complement the offense the way that they need to? And then I'll just wrap it up and say my most impressive is Mike Evans. 151.2 QBR when targeted in this game, 97 receiving yards, like I mentioned, 2 touchdowns, 85 yards away from 1,000 yards. Dalton, this is the best I've seen Mike Evans look in a long, long time. This might be the best I've seen Mike Evans look ever. I'm going to be honest with you. He looked uncoverable in this game. Now, you could say, all right, he was going up against Caleb Farley and Mike Jackson, and J.C. Horn wasn't playing in this game, and it's the Panthers defense anyways. They need some help this offseason. I understand that. But Mike looked so explosive, so smooth, so confident playing with Baker Mayfield. The touchdown where he just absolutely mossed the guy, I can't even remember who is the one who was guarding him on that second touchdown, but it was just a grown man touchdown, plucking that thing out of the air. It was vintage Mike Evans, but now he's getting open over the middle of the field. He's giving you a little yards after catch. He looks more healthy. He looks more motivated. He looks more focused, and I think that this is just the best version of Mike Evans that we have seen in a long time, and that's really saying something as somebody who has had as much sustained success as he has. So shout out to Mike Evans, not just for getting in range of the 1,000-yard season, but genuinely playing some really, really good football here.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's always been the heart and soul of that passing game, and that's another example. I think we talked about his high threat percentage last week since he came back from injury, and I'm sure I didn't look at it in this game, and I'm sure it's extremely high, as it always is. Liam Cohen doing a great job of finding looks for him, right? That big X receiver. Sometimes you get teams that aren't as creative with getting that guy the football, right? I think about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they just line up George Pickens at the X and throw him go balls and hope he wins, right? Bucs don't do that with Mike Evans. There was a time where they used to, right? And there's times where you still need to, but the fact that they have designed so many looks inside, outside, corner routes, fade routes, whatever you want, they find ways to get Mike Evans the football because they know he's still their best player. My most impressive look, I almost went with Baker Mayfield, and then when I was going through the tape of this game, man, it's just so hard to ignore Bucky Irving and what he's doing. It's on a historic level, Trevor. 24 touches in this game, 190 yards, 7 explosive plays, 5 missed tackles forced, and the more I watch him, I go, yes, Mike Evans is obviously an elite passing weapon. Baker Mayfield's playing great. He's got 39 passing touchdowns this year. This is the engine. They have built an offense first and foremost around Bucky Irving, and obviously Rachaad White's played well too, but it's getting to a historic level here. Look, he's got a 90.3 overall grade this season, all right? I had to go back and look. How many other backs have done this, right, as a rookie in PFF history? Backs with that at least 400 snaps played in the rookie season, okay? There's only 3 right now that are ahead of that 90.3 mark. Alfred Morris for Washington, who ran for over 1,600 yards. Adrian Peterson and Alvin Kamara. That's it. Those are the guys who've had a better rookie year since 2006 in Bucky Irving. It's amazing what he's already one of the best backs in football. He can do it both ways, running and receiving. They have built this offense in a way that step one is Bucky Irving. Step two is any of the play action we want to get to. And step three is as many ways as we can get Mike Evans the ball as possible. And I think the fact that Irving is this good, or I don't think I ever expected him to be this good, maybe ever. I mean, he's you could argue he's a top 5 back in the league right now, the way he's playing this season at a historic level, and he's going to continue to be the core of it. His production and the offensive line's improvement, especially in run blocking, is really what is driving this whole thing and opening all those opportunities for Baker Mayfield. Most disappointing, real quick, I mean, it doesn't make much of a difference the way the Bucs offense was playing, but the Panthers' pass protection, we've kind of seen some breakdowns the last couple weeks. 2 of the 3 lowest graded pass blocking games have been in the last 3 weeks against Dallas, and then obviously in this game against Tampa. They were in a lot of obvious passing situations. They were down by several scores in this game. And Bryce Young graded an 80 through it all. Props to him. I thought he played really well in the first half, actually. There isn't any part of this that's on Bryce Young. He's been really good. I think the Panthers can feel comfortable about Young going forward. So, as far as disappointing goes, it's a game where it is what it is. The Bucs were just on absolute fire, and there's not much the Panthers could have done about it.
Before we get on to the next game, New Year is coming up very soon, in fact. It's a great time to reevaluate the financial goals, not just for yourself, but also for your kids. Now is the perfect time to make sure your kids are on a path towards a solid financial future. A kid's investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life is a quick and simple way to set that up and let you invest in their future now for education, big milestones, and so much more. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kid's investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids, they cannot invest while they're minors, but a kid's investment account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments plenty of time to grow. The entire thing is online. It's very easy to set up an account. Could just take as little as 5 minutes, and then you can just manage your child's account right from your phone, monitor their investments, and be able to make some great decisions. Funds can be used from anything. And if they're younger, tuition, tutors, music classes, summer camp, whatever it is, or when they're young adults, first car, first business, first house, all that kinds of good stuff. The benefits are, there's just so many different ways that you could use this in a great way. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That is meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, let's hit on the Cowboys-Eagles game next. Eagles win this one big, 41-7. Score, though, to me, not an actual indicator of how a lot of this game went, at least for the majority of the first half. I'm surprised that this game ended as lopsided as it did. We can sort of get into why that was the case. Let's look at the top 5 graded Philadelphia Eagles in this game. Safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson with a 94.4. When you get 2 interceptions, that's probably going to be the case. So he's the top man here for the Eagles. Edge rusher Nolan Smith, a 91.0. Wide receiver Devontae Smith, a 90.5. Linebacker Orion Burks with an 81.8, and then offensive tackle Jordan Mailata, an 80.4. Kenny Pickett in this game started the game, played well, I thought, 77.1. We'll get to Tanner McKee as well, who also played in this game. On Dallas' side of things, safety Malik Hooker was their top-graded player at 78.5. Cornerback Derod Bland is 78.4. Linebacker Eric Kendricks is 75.7. Wide receiver Brandon Cooks is 74.3. Offensive tackle Terrence Steele, a 70.9. Cooper Rush in this game struggled, 51.3. Dalton, what was your stat that told the story?
I think the big lesson here is that I know 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl, the Eagles had the historic pass rush that had, what was it, like the second or third most sacks ever or something like that, or maybe even the most ever. I don't remember what it was. It was a historic level pass rush season. This defense, I think, front to back is better than that one at this point. 83.6 defense grade, which a lot of teams don't have that in a single game this year. That's only the 4th best of the season for Philadelphia. They are 1st overall, 4th in run defense grade, 2nd in pass rush grade, I believe, behind Pittsburgh, and 1st in coverage grade. This is the best defense in football. I don't know what the weakness is. I could even go back to that defense 2 years ago and why I picked the Chiefs still to beat them in that Super Bowl and go, well, they couldn't cover in the slot. That was like the one. It was like the one big Achilles heel. I don't think there's an Achilles heel on this defense. I don't know. I don't know how you consistently score on them with as layered as they are at all three levels. They've got great players. Jalen Carter. Now you see Nolan Smith breaking out up front. Baun and Dean have been great at linebacker. Dean didn't play in this game, but of course Oren Burks goes in there and plays great because this is what Philadelphia does under Vic Fangio. And then getting Gardner Johnson back, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. We've talked about it all year. This is the best defense in football right now. And the fact that the offense can go in there and not have to worry about, okay, now they ended up with 41 points, or the offense scored 34 in this game with the Gardner Johnson pick six, but it's just so much easier to play offense and to play a conservative style of offense that they do with Saquon Barkley when your defense, when you know they're not giving up more than maybe 20 points. And I think that might be the biggest X factor in the NFC right now, is the fact that they have this defense. Minnesota's got a very good defense, but I think they scheme their way above their talent level. We've talked about Detroit and their defensive injuries, the Bucs secondary. The Rams are good, but they're still very young. This Eagles defense has all the right pieces and the right coordinator running the show. You can find me a better defense in football right now. I don't think there is one.
25 turnovers so far this year. It's fifth best in the NFL. So not only are they playing sound defense, they're playing aggressive defense. And that's ultimately the stat that told the story here for me, because if you remember how that game started, Cowboys were kind of marching down the field, right? And then they throw the turnover. All right, it's pick six. Not great. Now you're in the hole 7-0. And then what'd they do? They went back and they marched down the field again. So this game actually started decently competitive, but the stat that told the story is the turnovers. 2 fumbles lost, 2 interceptions. And that's ultimately how you can get a game that starts pretty dang competitive, even all things considered, and ends up being an absolute blowout. So to me, it was just those turnovers, but I'm glad you highlighted the defense, because you're right. I mean, when Philadelphia was making their Super Bowl run a couple of years ago, you would look at this defense, and really, I think the linebacker level, you talked about, okay, not being able to cover in the slot. I thought the linebacker level was very unreliable as well. Being a draft guy, I felt like for many years I would just want to give the Eagles whoever the best linebacker in the draft was. And I know that Howie doesn't really operate like that, but it felt like that was one of their few weaknesses on the team. So I wanted to continue to give them linebacker play. And now look at them. Now they're a linebacker factory, I guess. You know, the Kobe Dean, Zach Bond playing very well. Ryan Burks just comes in and he plays well. So it is very, very hard to find any sort of weakness at all whatsoever with the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, like, you just look at the production that they're getting out of the tight end room as well, like Grant Calcaterra now and how he is playing. And it's just like, man, the Eagles are not only, you know, starting caliber worthy of a deep playoff run and a Super Bowl run, but it's like they've got the depth to be able to do it as well. I've got more faith in the Philadelphia Eagles' depth than almost any other team in the NFL because of how well this roster is constructed. So shout out to Howie Roseman for that. Obviously, the big one is Jalen Hurts getting healthy and being able to play on this team. Most impressive for me before Kenny Pickett went out with, I believe, a shoulder injury. The Pickett tush push in this game. It happened twice, happened on 4th down. The Eagles didn't get away from their identity, even without Jalen Hurts there. And I remember seeing some people after they got the first one, they converted the first down with the tush push. I saw some people on social media be like, how much did Kenny Pickett squat? You know, let's hear about what Kenny Pickett's putting up in the weight room. And then they had a touchdown as well where he was able to get in for another tush push. So love that the Eagles stayed true to their identity there. Love that Kenny Pickett was able to execute the tush push. I won't say just as well as Jalen Hurts, but successful nonetheless there from Kenny Pickett. Who is your most impressive and most disappointing?
Look, I'm betting C.J. Gardner-Johnson's glad he came back to Philly this year. I mean, he was really good 2 years ago during that Super Bowl run. Left and went to Detroit last year. Obviously got hurt and the season didn't go the way he wanted it to. He's having his best year right now. 92.9 coverage grade in this game. The pick six, another interception on a deep ball. 82.6 coverage grade this season. That's a career high by far. I mean, in Gardner-Johnson, we've always known him as a guy who can make plays on the ball, but then there's kind of some mistakes or even some missed tackles that come with that, making less mistakes this year. And I think those plays in between the big plays gotten a lot better. 6 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. He's having his best season in the NFL. It was really a perfect fit for him to come back at a spot where the Eagles, they really struggled at that other safety spot, you know, next to Reed Blankenship last year. To get Gardner-Johnson back in here producing at the level he has been big time for them. And with Cooper DeJean in the slot, you don't really see him playing that hybrid role and getting stuck in man-to-man situations anymore. He can really, truly just lock in, play safety, do what Vic Fangio needs him to do on the back end back there, and he's been really, really good. My most disappointing, I think, look, again, this is a game, 2 backups. It was kind of weird. No CeeDee Lamb. We know the Eagles are better than the Cowboys, but the Cowboys offense just kind of completely shut down without CeeDee Lamb, which I get it. I mean, it is what it is. Brandon Cooks was the only player with more than 30 receiving yards. It all kind of broke down on Cooper Rush. I mean, honestly, when you were already kind of a middling at best offense, if that, with one of the simpler offenses in football, you're playing the best defense in football, and now you don't have CeeDee Lamb, that's how it's going to go, honestly. There really wasn't, even though Kenny Pickett was playing, considering the rest of the roster pieces that were available for both teams, I don't think the Cowboys had much of a shot to win this game.
Yeah, my most disappointing is just the Cowboys season overall. I think that this game was sort of a culmination of where they're at. Injuries to Dak Prescott, injuries to CeeDee Lamb, injuries along the offensive line. DeMarvion Overshown's out for the year. They had Trayvon Diggs out for the year. They had Deron Bland missing time at the beginning of the year. Micah Parsons has missed time. And so it's just like this whole team, it feels like, has never really been what they hoped it would be on paper for really any point of the season, let alone a large enough stretch to make a difference in a pretty good NFC conference. So it's just kind of disappointing for the Cowboys. Now, I'm not just saying that it's not Mike McCarthy's fault at all. You should bring him back 100%. They got an interesting decision this offseason with 3 12-win seasons with Mike McCarthy, and then this season, which didn't go very well for them. And again, I'm not taking all of the blame off of Mike McCarthy for it, but they missed a lot of their key players for most of this entire season. The roster that you constructed, the game plans that you have, just not a lot of games where all of those guys are out there. So it is just going to be an interesting talking point. Shout out to Mike Renner. Shout out Tanner McKee. 3 for 4 passing, 2 touchdowns, 54 passing yards coming in for Kenny Pickett. Had the big time throw in this one, and I remember Mike. He loved Tanner McKee when he was coming out of the draft a couple of years ago, and so I tweeted this out yesterday. Just full vindication there for him, getting to see Tanner McKee come in.
Never wrong, just early.
No, never wrong, just early. We'll stay in the NFC East. We'll talk about another NFC East team, a team that got a thrilling victory in the New York Giants, dropping from the overall spot in the NFL draft. We'll get to that in a second, but they end up winning the game. I don't want to take anything away from them. We don't want to, positive, negative. We're just staying with the positives here, 45-33. We'll get plenty of negatives in as we talk about the Indianapolis Colts. Top 5 graded players for the New York Giants here in their big win. Wide receiver Malik Neighbors, deservingly so, at the very top of this list with a 93.7 overall grade. Safety Dane Belton with a 90.8. Wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson at 89.6. Edge rusher Brian Burns an 86.9. And then Kayvon Thibodeau with an 82.1. You love to see the 2 edge rushers that we've talked about so much on this show, wanting to see more from. Can we get something from the edge rush guys? Being here in the top 5 here for the New York Giants. Quarterback Drew Lock in this one, 4 touchdowns. Looked like the Drew Lock of Missouri. 78.3 overall grade. And then on Indianapolis' side of things, tight end Kylan Granson with an 85.2. Wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. an 83.4. Wide receiver Alec Pierce an 82.9. Edge rusher Tyquan Lewis an 81.1. And then linebacker EJ Speed a 78.7. Joe Flacco in this one. Very up and down. A lot of peaks and valleys here from Joe Flacco, but some really good throws here for him in this game. Ends up spitting out a 76.9 overall grade. Dalton, what was your stat that told the story here in this thrilling win for the Giants?
So I think it's very hard to blame Joe Flacco for a loss in which their defense gave up 45 points to the Giants. And there is a lesson to be learned here, and especially in the NFL. Everyone's a professional, right? And Drew Lock included. If you run your defense in such a way that you just go out there and everyone on the field obviously knows what coverage you're in, obviously knows where you're going to be. Now, on top of the Colts didn't execute on defense at all, okay? When you make it obvious what you're in and what the defense looks like, any quarterback, as long as they have a clean pocket, can hurt you. So often the Colts, because Gus Bradley's their defensive coordinator, he comes from that old Seattle regime with Pete Carroll, and they run cover 3 and single high, and that's just what they do, and we don't care. We're going to put this defense on the field, and we're better than you, right? I've seen Robert Saleh do the same thing. We've seen other defensive coordinators do the same thing. Drew Lock against single high in this game, which he saw plenty of. 9 for 11, 172 yards, a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, a big-time throw, an 83 passing grade. Think about it this way. 13 dropbacks against single high. The Giants got 6 explosive plays out of it and a pass interference drawn out of it. And the Colts had a 29.7 coverage grade in what is mostly their base coverages. They run cover 3 at the highest rate in football. They run single high defenses at a top 5 rate, 3-1 essentially. They don't disguise hardly at all. They're going to show you what they're in. So there's not really a signature of this defense where you go, okay, what's going to mess with us here? Like when you think about a Brian Flores or somebody like that and you're sitting there stressing out because I don't know what he's going to show me any given play. That's not the case with this defense. On top of the fact that they haven't played great all year anyway, if you make it so obvious what you're in and you give a coach like Brian Daboll an entire week to prepare for just your base looks because that's all you run, this can happen. Even with Drew Lock playing quarterback. He was terrific in this game. The receivers were excellent in this game. Brian Daboll's game plan was excellent in this game. Everything about it was just the Colts defense. A, there's been a lot of stretches this year where they just haven't been good enough in general. And B, it's just too simple. They made Drew Lock's life way too easy offensively in this game, and that's why they gave up all these points.
I think we can dig into this a little bit deeper if we want to, but to me, this is about as bad of a loss as you can get for the Colts. And I think that it's just a culmination of how their year has gone. How do you, with the playoffs on the line, going against a team that you are much better than, how do you play as poorly disciplined as the Colts did against the Giants? 14 missed tackles against the Giants in this game. 8 missed tackles versus the run. 6 missed tackles in the receiving game. 39.5 overall coverage grade. You mentioned how they were just shredding those cover 1 situations. My most impressive in this game is Malik Nabers. And just to bring it up, Malik Nabers, 8 targets, 7 catches, 171 receiving yards, 103 yards after the catch. That's the thing. Look, I don't want to take anything away from Drew Lock at all whatsoever. It was a fantastic performance. The common stat sheet looked amazing. The 4 touchdowns, I don't want to take anything away from him. I really don't. He had 1 big-time throw in this game. More than half of his passing yards were after the catch yards. And if you watch ESPN or NFL Network or any of these networks, and they showed you replays of this Giants-Colts game, which I'm sure that you saw, the best plays are Malik Nabers getting a screen or a slant and taking it to the house. Malik's a great player. He's great after the catch. Really good athlete. But the thing that stands out so much more than Drew Lock's passes or even Malik Nabers' athleticism is the Colts' lack of effort tackling. That game was bad to watch, man. And I've been sitting here and I'm when we did the Fixing the Colts episode for NFLSE, I look at these teams and I look at these moves that Chris Ballard has made, and I'm like, man, he's a good scout. I think he is a good team builder. I really do. He doesn't have a ton of misses. Yeah, of course, he's got the big swings that, obviously the Richardson one, but he's got other big swings that really haven't worked out for him. Certainly was getting a lot of veteran quarterbacks there on that little run. But those are sort of the swings that you have to take. I'm like, man, I like Shane Steichen a lot. I like Chris Ballard a lot. I don't really know if I'd change anything going into next year for the Colts. I don't know. I don't even know if either of these guys are here next year at this rate. Now, I think it's much more likely that maybe Chris Ballard goes than Shane Steichen. But, dude, this is the stuff that kills franchises. Like, it's the bad effort. It's the bad discipline. Look at that Amir Smith-Marset kick return for a touchdown to start the half. The man didn't make a single move. The man ran in a straight line. He just ran it. He caught the ball and he ran in a straight line. And he scored a touchdown. The effort from the Colts, I don't know if it... Look, there's all sorts of rumors about what's up with Anthony Richardson. Obviously, he gets benched earlier this season for taking himself out. I don't really want to regurgitate too many rumors of things that I don't know for sure, but it was very strange the way that they handled this week. Oh, Anthony Richardson, he's doubtful. Oh, now he's out. Well, what's the injury? Okay, well, he's sore. What do you mean he's sore? And then after the game, they go, well, he's going through back spasms. So it's like, okay, back spasms sounds better. Why didn't you say that at the beginning? It makes me think that now you're lying because of the backlash that was there. Why wouldn't you have just said that in the beginning? So now you've got we saw that there was some team backlash when Richardson, tapped himself out? Was this week all sorts of chaotic because Richardson wasn't going to play because of soreness or his foot or something like that? And is the team just checked out of this year entirely whatsoever? I don't know what happened. But for the game to go the way that it did for the Colts yesterday, that is some concerning culture stuff, man. There are some good players on that roster, and there have been some good Colts games for them. Were they there yet? No, but they've been on the line going into the last 2 weeks of the season with all the turmoil that they had, and they still had a chance to at least call themselves in the hunt. And that's how you played against the Giants? That's bad, man. That's a lot. To me, that game that we saw yesterday against the Giants, that's a lot worse than, well, they don't have the corners they want. Well, they don't have the safeties they want. Well, they need a little bit more pass rush. Well, they need a little bit more help here. Like, that entire team concern is way worse than any quote-unquote team needs that we're going to talk about for the Colts going into the offseason. That's, unfortunately, now the storyline that we're going to talk about with them going into next year. And that's a shame. It really is.
Yeah, no, I think you look at the list of things that have gone on this year, and the fact that they were in playoff contention this long, I think represents, like you mentioned, some of the talent they have, because you've got a really good offensive line, you got a good receiving core, but you're looking at a team that, look, this defense, maybe not to this extent, it's not been a very good defense all year. The fall off of Jonathan Taylor, I think some of the counting stats might look good, but it's really not been good, and you can trace it back even, the signature play of this season, if there's a single play for the Colts, is him dropping the ball before the goal line last week. And then you're sitting with a quarterback who, you mentioned the injury stuff. He's missed half his games over the first 2 seasons of his career, and on top of that, he's the least accurate quarterback in the NFL since Tim Tebow. I mean, that's where we were. I was looking at some numbers, some accuracy numbers, adjusted completion rates, things like that. That is where we're at with this. So you have to, first of all, you already had a major project in fixing Richardson still, and he's still dealing with injuries. And you mentioned he pulled himself out for a play, and that was a big controversy earlier in the year. Now you've got a whole mess with this whole team, and mentally you wonder where they are having played a game like this. So I'm with you. I think this is going to raise some real questions about the leadership of this team, because even with the Broncos loss last week, the Colts were relatively in control of this thing, right? With the Broncos losing to the Bengals and knowing they were in control going into this game, and they played like that. I mean, it is inexcusable. Real quick, most impressive, I just want to highlight one matchup too. So often with the Giants this year, we've seen it's been Malik Neighbors and basically nobody else. Well, they finally got somebody else in this game too. I want to give credit to their number 2 wide receiver there, Wan'Dale Robinson, 5 catches, 71 yards, couple of big explosive plays, especially one late in the game over the middle where he was breaking tackles and carrying guys inside the 10-yard line. Had a touchdown, career high 86 receiving grade for Wan'Dale Robinson. And on the other side of that matchup, look, you need your best players to play at their best in games like this. Usually Kenny Moore is the Colts' best defensive back. 28.2 coverage grade in this game, the second lowest of his career. 5 catches allowed, 120 yards. Missed a tackle on the big Neighbors touchdown late in the game that put the Giants up 2 scores again. He was in the curl flat. I don't know if he got there late or it just looked like you mentioned, the Colts just didn't want to hit anybody. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense considering the stakes, and also gave up the touchdown to Wan'Dale Robinson as well. I just think when you have your best players, and Kenny Moore's a real leader on this team, when you have your best players playing like that, we have a serious problem. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to what went into the preparation of this game. And where was this team's mental state at after losing to Denver last week? And again, seeing Denver lose the night before to Cincinnati and going, oh, we're in the driver's seat. Was there just never a thought that they were in the drive? I don't know. I'm with you. It's very puzzling. Losing's one thing. Losing like this and giving up 45 points to that team, that's a whole different animal. I don't know right now where they go from here.
My most disappointing before we move on is just a wasted good Flacco day. Now, it wasn't a perfect Joe Flacco day, but there were some
He's Joe Flacco. I mean,
there were some nuts throws that he made in this game. He didn't give one rip about the consequences for some of these throws, and it was just funny to watch because he completed a handful of them, which I had a good time watching that game with Joe Flacco. That was a lot of fun. But I think that just overall, the defensive effort in particular wasted a Joe Flacco day where he did enough, in my opinion, to have them win this game. And the defense just absolutely did not. Yes, we're going to have the culture conversation back-to-back here as we're talking about the New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills for our next game. The Bills win this one 40-14, an absolute blowout. Top 5 graded players for the Buffalo Bills. Cornerback Christian Benford, 86.0. Edge rusher Greg Rousseau, an 85.1. Linebacker Matt Milano, an 81.6. Offensive tackle Deion Dawkins with a 75.3. Linebacker Joel Anderson with a 74.9. Josh Allen in this one, elite. 91.2 overall grade. On the Jets side of things, linebacker Jamie Sherwood with a 76.6. Defensive tackle Bruce Hector with a 75.6. Guard Elijah Vera Tucker, a 74.3. Linebacker Quincy Williams, a 73.8. And tight end Tyler Conklin with a 72.9. Aaron Rodgers in this one, yikes, 46.1. Stat that told the story here, Dalton. What are we rolling with?
Do you want to know what the Jets did wrong in this game, Trevor?
Signed Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago.
Well, that's a part of it, but it even goes further back. They flew to Buffalo, and they existed. That's what they did wrong.
So they should have drove. They should have gone old school. They should have gone high school football, is what you're saying.
Maybe that would have got them mentally more right. But the fact that the Jets existed at all in Buffalo was a problem. Because if you've watched this game for the last 5 years, when they go to Buffalo, this is pretty much how it goes. 5 straight losses in Buffalo. Their last win in 2019 when they beat the Bills was a Week 18 game, okay? The quarterback playing in that game, because the Bills were already in the playoffs, was Matt Barkley. That's the last time they won in Buffalo. Matt Barkley was the quarterback.
USC legend.
USC legend. Sam Darnold versus Matt Barkley, USC legends.
Wow.
Outscored in their last 5 games in Buffalo, outscored 146-59. This isn't really news. 43.5 passing grade in those 5 games because they're the Jets, and that's how it works. They've lost 5 straight in Buffalo. Most of them have looked like this. As long as Josh Allen still has 2 arms and 2 legs, they're going to continue to lose like this in Buffalo for the foreseeable future because the Bills are the Bills and the Jets are the Jets. I don't think there's a whole lot of actually outstanding takes from this game other than, I mean, that's just it. The Bills are the Bills and the Jets are the Jets. And when they go to Buffalo, in New York, I should say in Jersey at MetLife Stadium, they'll play some closer games. We've seen that. The Jets have pulled a couple of wins. They will play a close game earlier this year. Greg Zuerlein kind of blew the game. But in Buffalo, no. There's not a soul on this planet for the next 5-6 years that when the Jets are going to Buffalo, you can't pick them to win the game because this is how they all go. This is just where it's just like when we used to go to New England for all those years with Brady. No, it's not going to happen.
Maybe they need to switch it up. Maybe they need to fly to Canada instead. Stay in Canada for their trip. Then go to Buffalo, play the game.
I'm trying here.
I don't know. I don't know what to do.
As a Jet fan, at this point, they can go to Canada and just stay there. I don't even need them to come back to Buffalo. I can remember. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember a time when I don't even remember who won I think the Bills won the game. We had to play them in Detroit one time because there was a snowstorm in Buffalo.
Yes.
And I remember that being a game. I believe that was the game where there was a big go ball that Sanchez threw a perfect ball and it went right off Braylon Edwards' face mask. I don't know if you remember this. They had to play on like a Monday or Tuesday in Detroit. I
do remember that part.
Yeah.
Yes.
I right now, either way, if the Jets have to play them in Buffalo, you can watch it if you want, but they're gonna look like this every year because Josh Allen is Josh Allen, and the rest of it is what it is.
Try to find the stats for that game. I'm going to give my stat that told the story, and then I'll go on a little bit of a rant here because I actually want to hear what the stats of that game would have been. My stat that told the story here, we'll sort of get into some other things, but ultimately, the Jets' offensive line, particularly their offensive tackles, were not good enough in this game. Carter Warren had to come in for Morgan Moses, who left this game with injury. Max Mitchell was already starting at offensive tackle in replace of Olufashinu, who's out for the season with a foot injury. Both of those guys gave up at least 2 pressures. Both of those guys gave up a sack. The offensive tackle play just for the Jets was not good enough. And these aren't their scheduled starters. So it's understandable that they wouldn't be playing well, especially with a Buffalo team that's really giving it their all still. But the offensive tackle play was not good enough. I think the offensive line play overall just was not good enough from the Jets here in this game. Most impressive for me, I'm going to go with the Bills' second half offense, not just in this game, but the entire season. 0.178 EPA per play average in the second half. this entire season for the Buffalo Bills, the only team that is better is the Baltimore Ravens. The Bills are right there as one of the best teams at being able to get into the second half and put their foot on the gas. And that is a great sign of a team that we've talked about this before. Some teams, they can come out of the gate hot and then it really sputters for them, right? I think that we've seen that at times from the Houston Texans. That was our big gripe with them. It's like, hey, first half would look great for the Texans. And then just really as the game would go on, they couldn't really figure it out. But for the Bills, it's sort of the opposite. They only get hotter as the game goes on, and that's what you want. That, especially when you have an MVP caliber quarterback, that's really what you want. You want them to be playing their best ball in the third and fourth quarter when they understand the defense that they're going up against. They understand how the game is currently being played on that day, and they get to adjust pretty well. Most disappointing for me is Tyrod Taylor playing at all in this game. Shout out to Tyrod, all right? 11 for 14. 83 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, played well when he came in. And he came in when the score was 40-0, I believe. So you can understand situationally why Tyrod Taylor's coming into the game. The backup quarterback didn't get a lot of opportunities to play in these games when the starting quarterback is healthy. Aaron Rodgers after the game, they asked him about, okay, did you have conversation with Ulbrich about Tyrod coming into the game? Because Aaron didn't get hurt. It was just a blowout. And Aaron said, quote, it was 33-0. We were sitting there, and I said to him, at some point, should probably go to Tyrod Taylor here, huh? And then the next play, the Bills threw a screen for a touchdown, so it was 40-0. I hate that. I hate everything about that there. The team is not good. The Jets are not good. Offense has not looked easy for this team almost at any point in time this season. If Jeff Ulbrich wanted to go to Tyrod Taylor, and he came to Aaron Rodgers and said, hey, I'm pulling you. I'm putting Tyrod in. Okay, he's the head coach. I get it. You are in a situation where we are having debates of whether or not you want Aaron Rodgers on your team next year. What are you taking him out of the game for? You got to continue to evaluate. Because here's the thing. If you're not continuing to evaluate the Jets, Rodgers is gone. So if you're telling me, hey, no, they've already made their decision, Rodgers is gone, then that's fine. Play Tyrod Taylor next week. Let Tyrod Taylor play all next week as well. But with them being in a situation where maybe we're having debates outside the building, again, maybe it's not a debate inside the building. If they're still going back and forth on whether or not they would want Aaron Rodgers to be part of the Jets next year, why is he coming out of the football game? Give him every rep. What does it matter? The offense just looked terrible this year. You want him to showcase literally anything. I don't know, man. I understand that when the game is that big of a blowout, the backups come in and it's natural. But to me, the Jets are not in that situation. And to me, Aaron Rodgers certainly isn't in that situation as a quarterback to just be like, yeah, take me out of the game here. That to me is more damning than almost anything else. I would want that quarterback. I would want the quarterback that's supposed to lead us next year to say, no, we've got 2 more games to get right. We got 2 more games to get better. And this is a situation where we're playing a divisional opponent on the road, and these are valuable snaps, no matter how the game has gone. And Aaron Rodgers didn't have that mentality. Jeff Ulbrich didn't have that mentality going to it. And I don't like the decision. I hated it. So that was my most disappointing.
So my most disappointing is Aaron Rodgers, just for the fact that he wasn't good on the field. And the biggest problem is he can't throw downfield. 1 for 4 with an interception beyond 10 air yards in this game. He's completed 40% of his throws of 10-plus air yards this year, which is down there with like backups and Aiden O'Connell's and even Caleb Williams and the guys who have really struggled to throw the ball downfield this year. That's where he's at with completing those passes. I think to your point, I don't think it matters with evaluating whether or not each rep mattering. We have seen enough. We've seen enough of the Jets to know what they are. We're in week 17. I don't think a rep in a 33-0 or 40-0 game for Aaron Rodgers really matters, especially with a team as dejected as it is. I think the bigger concern is that, and this has been the case for 2 years, and he's running the show. It's that if it's not a thought that came to Ulbrich's mind, which actually it should have come to Ulbrich's mind, I'm all for it. Pull him out. What do we need to see when they're down 40-0 from Aaron Rodgers?
I don't hate it if Ulbrich initiates it. I still would have been like, no. You're showing us what you could be next year or whatever. But if Ulbrich would have gone to him again and he was like, hey, it's 33-0, I'm putting Tyrod in. Okay, it's his job as interim head coach to be able to do something like that. for Rodgers to basically say, "Hey, I'm pulling myself out." That sucks.
It just further emphasizes the Jets' lack of leadership they've had through this entire process, really for 2 years. I mean, that's where it's at more so. The on-field, no, I think on the field it's very clear. They will be better off the sooner Aaron Rodgers is out of there. Another year of this, because this is what'll happen. You can bring in first-year coach and whatever you want. He's another year older. He already can't move. He already can't throw downfield. The sooner he's out of there, the sooner they can just move forward. I mean, now.
So then play Tyrod next week.
Sure, whatever, anything, literally anything. You just have to because now you have rumors that we don't know if Garrett Wilson's going to want to be there or not. That's a bigger problem than appeasing Aaron Rodgers. If you lose Garrett Wilson, then you start losing other guys. Who knows about Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall, whoever else, any of this young talent that we know the Jets have. Then you're a further train wreck. And I just don't see, from what we've seen this year, and we had high expectations of this, and really the what-if window was last year before he tore his Achilles, because last year's team would have been really good with the defense still playing the way they were playing.
Right.
This is shot. This is there's no extra. We've seen it. We've seen 16 games of this. He's not the longer that he is in New York, the worse it is long-term for the Jets franchise. That's where we're at now.
I agree with you for what it's worth. And just so people understand sort of where I was coming from with ranting, it's more of like, if there's any debate at all whatsoever, like if they were still deciding, do we want Aaron Rodgers, do we not want him back? In my opinion, him doing that in this game seals the deal. Like these are, maybe you're right, maybe not like rep to rep, like the reps don't matter, but him wanting to be out there for the reps matters, in my opinion. That's like that to me is like hey, this season sucks. Like, we're in a shitty situation here, but let's rally. That's the quarterback. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. And it felt like he did the exact opposite. So to me, it was more of, this is the exact opposite of what you want to see as a quarterback. And if you were still legitimately debating of whether or not he's going to be in New York next year, this was not what you wanted to see. This should almost have made the decision for you. He should not return to New York. It should be a total blow up of that regime and anybody that basically had anything to do with it. Outside of Woody Johnson, because he's not selling the team.
It's just, again, it just further emphasizes there's no leadership. So honestly, you mentioned it before. I'm with you. I would just play Tyrod next week. I wouldn't even. I don't think there's any bother. I don't think there's anything, any reason to bother with. Okay, or they're going to want to get Rodgers' 500th touchdown. Cool. Then throw one touchdown and sit him. I don't see.
The old Cam Ward.
Yeah,
Pull the
Cam Ward with Aaron Rodgers and show that it's fine in the NFL to do it. I mean, no, that's just me. I would start Tyrod this week. I just wouldn't. I just don't think we need to see anything else. I don't think there's any point in it.
Hey, before we move on to the next game, you guys played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? No better time to get in on it. The playoffs are here. Time's running out. It's the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL. DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. Super easy to get started. All you do, select 2 or more players. Choose if they will have more or less of a single stat, like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, more, all the good stuff. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, so much more. They're making things even sweeter for first-time players. New Pick 6 customers play just $5 on any Pick 6 set. You get $50 in Pick 6 credits. There's obviously a lot of pivotal matchups that we've got coming in next week. I mean, the big one is Lions-Vikings. I mean, like that's the one that everybody's looking at that's going to be absolutely massive. You have tons of players in that game with a lot of different intrigue. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson. And if you think that you know what's going to happen in that game one way or another, go check it out. Go check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. You win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF. For new customers, play just $5 on any $50 Pick 6 set, and you get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. If you've got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 is not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited, one per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. It's a limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Titans and Jags. Jags win this one 20-13, sort of a pickup game that ended up being a one-score game here. With the Jags winning it, let's take a look at their top 5 graded players. Linebacker Foyesei Oluokun was the top graded player here for Jacksonville, 86.4. Wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. at 84.3. Guard Brandon Scherf with a 75.1. Edge rusher Josh Hines Allen a 70.8. Cornerback Tyson Campbell a 69.9. Mac Jones in this one 80.8. On Tennessee's side, edge rusher Arden Key an 84.5. Wide receiver Calvin Ridley an 83.3. Cornerback Chidobe Awuzie a 76.5. Linebacker Jerome Baker with a 74.4. Then offensive tackle John Ojukwu with a 71.8. Quarterback Mason Rudolph a 66.0. What'd you think? Stat that told the story.
You know, I had more fun watching this game than probably a normal person would, because honestly, I thought Mac Jones played a really good game. I think he made himself some money in this game as far as being a backup, whether it be into the future in his hometown in Jacksonville or elsewhere. I think you could certainly do a lot worse as a backup quarterback than Mac Jones. 77.9 passing grade in this game, no turnover-worthy plays, made enough downfield throws. I think that was a big thing. We've seen them, you're going to mention it too, kind of force-feeding the ball to Brian Thomas Jr., which understandably because he's already a terrific player, but 10-plus yard throws, 5 of 7, 79 yards, 2 big-time throws, 91 passing grade. I thought, look, Mac Jones, he was decisive. He made his reads very, very quickly, as he can do. We know the limits with him are more with arm talent than with his mind. And I look, over the last 5 games, 75.4 overall grade. I don't know that you could ask a whole lot more out of your backup quarterback than what Mac Jones has done the last few weeks in Jacksonville. I know it's been a tough year, and I know basically it's been Brian Thomas Jr. with all the optimism, and the rest of the team is just falling apart, and they're going to be picking in the top 5. But I'll tell you what, I think Mac Jones, either this offseason or in several future offseasons, I think he's going to be a coveted piece as a backup quarterback because of games like this. I thought he was really good.
He seems to be playing very motivated. I do agree with you. And I don't know if that's just like the hometown hero effect with him, growing up in Jacksonville, playing high school football in Jacksonville, now getting to play for the Jags, giving the best he can now that he's wearing the Jags jersey and he's getting to play out the season. But whatever it is, I mean, he is playing some really good ball, which is a lot of fun to see. My most impressive for them, sort of my stat that told the story, I think these are just sort of woven into sort of what you said with Mac Jones. Jags were 8 for 13 on third down, 62%. And I think that's a big reason why they end up winning this football game, because they were straight up better on third down than the Titans were. And this ended up being a one-score game. And I think that's what it came down to. On the most impressive side of things, or stat that told the story, whatever you want to see, Brian Thomas Jr. has just been unbelievable this football season. 13th in quarterback rating when targeted at a 113.2. He's 4th in receiving yards now with 1,179. He is 5th in receiving touchdowns with 10. And he's a 31.7% threat over the last month. So as the season has gone on, they've sort of been heating this dude up. Because if you just look at numbers overall throughout the whole season, his threat percentage is, I think, he's right around 24.5. Over the last month, it's 31.7. And I know that things have sort of transpired with guys being in and out of the lineup to really help that and get him some more targets and some more emphasis. But it's like the first 5-6 games of the year, they were like, this guy's good, but he's a rookie. He's just a rookie. We're not going to prioritize him a ton on this team. And now the last month, they're like, Brian, please save us. that's the passing attack. That's the offensive philosophy overall. So unbelievable rookie season for Brian Thomas Jr. He's been wide receiver 1 out of that group. And I think that certainly Malik Neighbors is right there, his teammate as well. We were talking before the show. We're talking about, how good is the royal line of LSU wide receivers right now with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. But Thomas Jr.'s just been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, let alone the rookie tab for him there. So he was once again the stat that told the story, and his performance is why the Jags are able to get a win.
Yeah, and I mean, you already know the 2 guys who used to throw all those guys the ball at LSU were pretty good too, in Burrow and Daniels. So they're doing it right in the passing game down there. But no, I think Thomas, the increased emphasis on just getting him the ball. And you know what I'm most impressed with too? I think a lot of us thought coming into the year that he was obviously a vertical weapon with explosive speed. I've been a little bit surprised with how much his game is diversified when it comes to this route running and getting more yards after catch than I thought he did at LSU.
Oh, way more. Yeah.
It's been an incredible, really transformation, I think, and the fact that he's this versatile and this good at all levels of the field already. This is a number one receiver in the league, and you mentioned between him and Malik Neighbors, just freaks coming out of Baton Rouge this year, and Brian Thomas another one. When they do get Trevor Lawrence back next year healthy, at least he's got a number one wide receiver, and it makes some of their draft decisions kind of interesting. Is it still if they have a shot at Travis Hunter, or would they make a trench pick, or what would you do? But I'll tell you what, got to feel good about having Thomas out there on the outside. Most impressive, I'm going to take the middle linebacker, Foye Oluokun. I thought when you watch Tennessee try to run the ball in this game, the handful of plays where they got hands on Oluokun, they ripped off some chunks. But there was a lot of plays where they didn't. He was really good. He was flying around in run defense, man. 83.8 run defense grade with 4 stops, and also a huge forced incompletion on first down of the final series in the game as Tennessee was driving down trying to tie the game. Oluokun, we've seen him before at the very top or near the top of the league leaders in tackles in past years. I think at times they do have a really good linebacker duo with him and Devin Lloyd, and another couple of pieces in that unit there that I think the Jags, they're not completely devoid of talent. I just think they kind of are missing pieces in the wrong spots, right? When you talk about in the secondary where they've struggled all year, on the offensive line they need to get better for sure. But, I think you can see bright spots where they are set at certain places, and linebacker's another one, along with Brian Thomas Jr. wide receiver. And most disappointing for me, I'll go in the slot on the Titans side. Roger McCreary, tough day. 30.1 coverage grade is his lowest of the season. 6 catches, 47 yards allowed, a touchdown to Parker Washington. I mean, just, a tough day. Mac Jones had a really fun day throwing into the slot to both Washington and Brian Thomas Jr. It's another thing. He'll line up in the slot too and burn you either on slot fades or coming across the field. So tough day for McCreary. I think, a good win for the Jags, just to kind of keep the spirits up again. It's another team in a tough season that got a big win. And, I know you'll make the draft argument position. I'll tell you what, was there a bigger winner yesterday as far as the draft than the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, they're number 2 now. They're picking at number 2 overall, right behind the New England Patriots. And it looks like with the Patriots facing the Bills this upcoming week that they're going to lock in that number 1 overall pick. But the Titans, of the Raiders winning, which we'll get to, the Jags winning, the Giants winning. Yeah, I think that the Titans are the biggest benefactor, all of that outside of the Patriots, which were sort of already in contention there for that top pick. So Titans getting number 2. Obviously, that's going to be great for them. Most disappointing for me was J.C. Latham. Latham, 6 pressures allowed in this game, 1 sack allowed, 15.4 pressure percentage in this game on 39 pass blocking snaps. So it was tough for him. I think it's just been a tough year overall for him. Been learning, and I think that's totally fine with an up and down season there for him. But I don't think the work is done along the offensive line for the Titans. I think that they need to continue to invest in it, even with bringing in Lloyd Cushenberry. So it could have been a better day for him, but to me, it was just a little disappointing. I'd like to see him finish a little bit stronger. He's got one more game to be able to do that. Just before we move on, I agree with you. I don't think the Jags are terrible. It's not like I don't think that they have any talent on that team. To me, I just don't think they're being led by the right coaching staff. And again, I'll admit, I thought that they were hitting a home run with Doug Peterson when they hired Doug Peterson, and they haven't. It didn't work out, and they need to totally clean house this offseason. I don't know if they're going to get rid of Trent Baalke or not, but they certainly should get rid of basically everybody on that coaching staff, and they got to go a new direction because the roster's too good for them to be playing this poorly, even when Trevor Lawrence was out there. And I think that Trevor Lawrence really needs to take that next step of behind who comes in next to be the head coach of this team.
It feels like,
go ahead.
Real quick, I know we've heard some other teams, obviously the Jets and the Bears and the coach. Doesn't it feel like we should be hearing more about maybe Ben Johnson would think about going there to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence sitting there? I feel I feel like that's not been mentioned at all in any of these scenarios.
It hasn't a lot. We talked about this when we were doing the Fix Your Franchise episode for the Jags. The big thing that gets in the way of this, I think, is Trent Baalke, because it feels like if anybody's going to stay in Jacksonville, it's going to be Baalke. And Baalke has been the general manager of the Jags when they've gotten, what will this be, like 3 number 1 picks in 5 years? And it's like the Jags just have not been a good football team. He's been the general manager for 5 years, and the team's about to get the number one. Well, would have been in line to get the number one overall pick again. I guess they're not. They're further down in the lineup this year, so I can't say that anymore. But still, I mean, like the team is bad, and that I think is the biggest roadblock for Ben Johnson, who has talked about like, oh, I'm only going to take head coaching interviews of teams that I would actually consider accepting the job if they offered it to me. And he's talked about, or at least there are reports out there, the continuity between him and the general manager, willingness to set up a winning culture. And I just nothing, those last 2 points, nothing about Jacksonville sort of says that that's the case. So in theory, should this be a good Ben Johnson landing spot because of Trevor Lawrence? Yes. I don't think they will be because of probably the roadblocks that he is going to set up himself to make sure that he picks the right job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's reasonable.
Yeah. So, anyways, Raiders Saints. Moving on to the next game. Raiders win this game 25-10. Top 5 graded players on the Las Vegas Raiders here. Better be paying attention here, Walt. Safety Thomas Harper with a 93.2 overall grade. Guard Jackson Powers Johnson a 90.1. Edge rusher Caleb Chase on an 85.1. Running back Amir Abdullah 83.8. Tight end Brock Bowers is 75.7. Quarterback Aiden O'Connell in this one a 67.7. On New Orleans side of things, linebacker Pete Werner with a 75.4. Guard Cesar Ruiz with a 75.1. Excuse me. Tight end Juwan Johnson is 74.6. Edge rusher Carl Granderson is 71.3. Tight end Foster Moreau a 69.4. Spencer Rattler, not great, 52.9 overall grade in this one. Stat that told the story, Dalton. What do we got?
I think I might have done this a little bit backwards. I'm actually going to start with the most impressive because these two things kind of go together. I want to mention a guy in that top 5 there. Amir Abdullah. Okay. This is a guy, he's 31 years old. He's in his 10th year in the league. All right. That 83.8 overall grade is the best in any game of his career. This 10th year in the league. And 23 touches, 147 yards, 4 explosives, 8 forced missed tackles. I mean, we know the Raiders have struggled to run the ball all year. We've covered it extensively, and this was really the best day that they had running the football because of Abdullah. And they just said, you know what? Listen, we're going to give you the ball on a ton of early downs in this game, and we just need you to keep us ahead of the chains. And he did that and a whole lot more. I mean, he was really kind of the engine of the offense, which led to getting into, a lot of third and manageable kind of situations. Stat that tells the story for me then is the Raiders on third down went 10 of 18. And because they were converting all these third downs and because Abdullah kept them in good situations, they had the ball for almost 38 minutes. The Saints, on top of just not playing good offensive football, they never had the ball. Right. Aiden O'Connell on third down, 8 of 12, 131 yards, 3 big-time throws, 3, and an 86.2 passing grade. I mean, they just kind of manufactured enough offense here and played a really solid offensive game considering, talk about the pieces we're looking at here. Aiden O'Connell at quarterback, Amir Abdullah at running back, Jacoby Myers is your best wide receiver, Brock Bowers obviously an animal at tight end, but I mean, they just kind of put together a solid plan here and had some guys play really, really well, and I think it's a very rare occasion that we've seen the Raiders able to run the ball well, get in third and manageable, and make situations easier for whoever their quarterback is, in this case, Aiden O'Connell.
I think O'Connell played fine in this one. I mean, compared to obviously the best quarterbacks in the NFL, sure, maybe it's a little bit different. But for O'Connell standards and what he could bring to the table realistically, I thought he played fine. And I agree with you. I think that it was a decent game for them. Now, they were playing a terrible team in the New Orleans Saints, and this is about as bad as they've looked at home this season. The stat that told the story for me is Saints on third down. 1 for 10 on third down was the New Orleans Saints. They only converted once all day, a 19.6 passing grade for Spencer Rattler on third down. They had 7 passing attempts on third down in this game, just converted 1 of them. That was their lone first down. On 5 of their 9 dropbacks on third down, they were facing a distance of 10 or more yards. So that's a failure, not just on third down, but obviously it's a failure in the early downs as well. So on more than half of their dropbacks, they were 3rd and 10 plus. It's very tough to convert, and that's why you kind of spit out that number of 10% the way that you do. So to me, just you talked about not having the ball a very long time. Well, when you don't convert on third down, you're not going to have the ball very long. So that's something that sort of was a stat to piggyback off of what you were talking about there with the Raiders just kind of handling the game. Most impressive to me, Jackson Powers Johnson. And it goes into a little bit more of, a look ahead. When you look at these teams, the Raiders, the Saints, are not really playing for anything here in 2024. But I do think that there have been building blocks from this offensive line for the Raiders in particular, looking at next season, whoever is going to be the quarterback of this team. Jackson Powers Johnson in particular, 82.7 overall blocking grade, 88.1 pass blocking grade. He gave up 0 pressures on 36 pass blocking reps. So DJ Glay has been good throughout the season. Jackson Powers Johnson, Colton Miller, obviously, the offensive tackle spots. So there have been some bright spots along this offensive line for the Raiders. And so when I think of what actual tangible takeaways are for this team, that's one of them, is how well he has played and how he's gotten better throughout the year, because he was struggling a little bit as he was in and out of the lineup in the early parts of the season, but I think he's been playing pretty well there. My most disappointing, just to sort of wrap things up on my end, it's got to be Spencer Rattler. We talked about the overall grade for him, a 52.9. 4 turnover-worthy plays in this one from Spencer Rattler. You're not going to get it done. And then, of course, 19.6 passing grade on third down. That stuff is just not going to get it done for you at the NFL level. So, to me, it was disappointing for him. I was excited for him to get another start under his belt, but this matchup was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, it was a tough one. It's same thing, kind of in the same boat. Most disappointing for me, just the Saints' second half offense in general. They had 7 drives in the second half. I'm gonna take out the last one. They drove down the field. Rattler threw an interception to end the game. There was a 6-drive stretch here where the Saints gained 8 yards, which is one of the wilder things I've heard this season. 2 first downs, had some penalties and sacks and things that took some yards away. 38.8 offense grade as a team. I mean, this is just where the Saints are as an offense right now with all the injuries that they've had and some young players trying to develop, especially up front. But it's tough. I mean, it's pretty representative of where the Saints are at. I think offensively and defensively, they have a lot to work on, I think, this offseason and really over the next couple off seasons. There's going to be, unless they're just going to continue to refuse to do so, there's going to be a full tilt rebuild here in New Orleans pretty soon.
Yep, I agree. Although, I feel like we've kind of said that before, and they don't do it.
If they are willing to do so, there probably should be. That's true.
Maybe the better
way to put it. Yeah,
doing a lot of heavy lifting in the sentence there. Packers Vikings. Let's hit this game next. So in Minnesota, obviously a monumental game if the Vikings were to win this game, which they did. Set up an epic matchup between them and the Detroit Lions for the 1 seed next week. Minnesota wins this one, hangs on in this one, 27-25. It feels like the Packers are that team that, man, you could just never count them out. But Minnesota's top 5 graded players in this one. Defensive tackle Harrison Phillips is at the top of the list with an 80.5. Linebacker Blake Cashman is playing really well, a 79.5. Wide receiver Jalen Naylor with a 78.6. Guard Dalton Reisner with a 75.9. And then wide receiver Justin Jefferson with a 75.8. Quarterback Sam Darnold in this one. Not his best, not his worst. 69.4 overall grade. On Green Bay's side, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, who we want to talk about linebackers that are playing well this season. Just an unbelievable job from Edgerrin Cooper in his rookie year, giving them a lot of faith to put even more on his plate going into 2025. An 80.4 overall grade in this one. Behind him, wide receiver Romeo Doubs with a 76.5. Running back Josh Jacobs, a 71.8. Offensive tackle Zach Tom, a 71.3. Guard Elton Jenkins with a 71.3. And then quarterback Jordan Love with a 72.3 in this one. Lots to talk about here, but what was your stat that told the story?
Yeah, I think there's several things to talk about here, but I'm going to start with the Packers once again getting off to a slow start. And you're looking at a team, the first half of this game, 4.8 yards per play. 5 first downs, a 58.1 offensive grade, minus 0.405 EPA per play in this first half, and just 2 explosive plays. One of them, a Josh Jacobs run that went for like 12, 13 yards on 3rd and 1. The other was a Tucker Kraft screen that put him into scoring position. Look, where we're at with the Packers right now, we've talked about games where they get off to great starts, but the 4 games where they've played the Lions and the Vikings are 4 of their 5 lowest graded offensive first halves of their season. The other one, the 5th one, was the Rams game where they were, I believe, down at halftime, and then the Rams started turning the ball over, kind of gave them the game. They, in their biggest games, in these 4 games, that in theory, these are the games that could have won you the division or gotten you more into that contention, and not being, well, they're the best third-place team in football, which is something, but they have to get off to better starts against elite teams like this, right? We've seen it in other games where they've gotten off to great starts. I think about the Cardinals game where they just blew them out the water in the first half, but you have to do it against these types of teams, especially when you're talking about the Lions and the Vikings being two of the best offensive teams in the first half of games. So I think before we get into, the scheme, and I have some of that stuff and the reasons that Brian Flores won him this game and all that, I think the Packers, when they play playoff teams, and they very well could play either of these two teams again, the Vikings or the Lions, they have to come out better. They cannot ask Jordan Love to come back from double-digit deficits against teams like this because it's just not going to happen.
Which is interesting because they're still a top 10 team, like you said, in first half points this year.
It's just in these big games specifically.
Right, no, and I think it's a great call out. I think it's a good call out because I have pointed out before how this team has the ability to start out of the gate really hot, specifically on the ground. Like they've been able to really set the tone exactly the way that they've wanted to. They've been able to control the clock, especially in the first quarter and their first couple of drives. But you're right. Obviously, against these teams, these specific teams, you need to be able to continue to do it. And so maybe we'll see them bounce back and get closer to what we have seen when they faced other teams this year. But I think it's pretty likely that we get a matchup between the Packers and one of these other two teams at some point next month, which can't wait to watch. Packers in coverage was something that really stood out to me in this game. 49.9 overall coverage grade as a team, 0.329 EPA per pass allowed here for the Green Bay Packers. It was just a struggle. And it's, to be fair, a struggle for every team that faces the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, this is a really tough team to cover. They've got so many different options. But even beyond that, they're so damn creative, man. I mean, what was that? That was the Jordan Addison touchdown was the one where it's like, all right, he's running a little comeback or he's running a little curl route. And then, just kidding. See, here's a spin move. Now I'm in the end zone. Now I'm catching it right over your shoulder. It's one of those things where not every offense even thinks about being that creative. A lot of them are much more streamlined and like, okay, we've got these concepts. It's dagger concept. It's a Yankee concept. It's a sail concept. We got to run it to the, and then you as an offensive coordinator, you take those concepts and you say, okay, now it's about me calling those concepts at the right time to attack defenses the right way. The Vikings and Kevin O'Connell have fully empowered their playmakers to just make plays. And I think that route was just a great example of them being incredibly creative. And it's something that we praise Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs for. They do what you would never think of. And after it happens, you go, that's brilliant. I do that on the playground. In fact, I have. I remember when I was in third grade, I ran that exact route, right? I mean, like, hey, when you think about that touchdown, how simple is that to think, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run a curl. And then I'm going to stand up as if I'm not getting the football. And then the second that defender sort of stands up as well and lets his guard down, boom, I'm going to spin move right behind it. Like, we've all thought of that on the playground. Anybody who's played playground football has thought of that route. The Vikings are doing it in NFL games with everything on the line. And it's what's taken the Chiefs to the next level. And I think it's what's helped part of what has helped take the Vikings to the next level and how creative that they're playing. But the Packers coverage, they just weren't ready for it. So I'm praising the Vikings, but at the same time, the Packers coverage was not ready for it. And it's a unit that has played well at times throughout the season, but really struggled in this past game as evidenced by that coverage grade. What about most impressive and most disappointing?
Yeah, and real quick, last point on that too is there was 100 graphics shown yesterday about how well the Vikings threw the ball over the middle of the field, which is true. They're one of the best teams over the middle in the league. It's a Kevin O'Connell thing. It's a Shanahan offense, a staple, right? But the immediate thought too for me was the Packers, this is still their biggest issue, is covering over the middle at linebacker, at safety. And I know they got some guys playing well. McKinney's had a great year. Edgerrin Cooper's coming on lately, but against the same thing, against the Lions and the Vikings, they do the two things that you cannot do. They get off to slow starts, and they give up way too much over the middle. And I think that's why they're clearly third behind these two teams right now, because when they play them head to head, they do all the things on offense and defense that you just cannot have against those two teams. But my most impressive here, I'm going with Brian Flores. What a game plan he put together. Trevor, he blitzed Jordan Love on 74% of his dropbacks. 74%. Jordan Love, 61.5 passing grade against the blitz, 84.3 when he wasn't blitzed. And for me, I thought it was kind of similar to, remember earlier in the year when the Vikings played the Texans, and they blitzed C.J. Stroud a lot because, well, Brian Flores will do that. And it wasn't so much that they got to Stroud. I don't even think the pressure rate was 40% in that game, but you could feel the speeding up, right? You could feel like it was sped up, or there's times I thought in this game where Jordan Love took too long. We don't have answers. Like everything in the Packers passing game was too vertical, and we need some quick game. And I need Jordan Love to get into his drop and play with a little more timing, because there's times where you can see it. He wants to hop back into that drop back. He wants to be deep in the backfield. He wants to see the whole field and rip the ball downfield. This wasn't a game for that. This wasn't a game where they were going to get vertical on Minnesota, because Brian Flores was speeding them up the same way. The other thing, too, I thought was interesting, and there was something I kind of felt like, especially watching a Justin Jefferson on the other side. The Vikings ran 22 man coverage snaps in this game, their second most of the season. Brian Flores gone a lot more zone blitz with this team that he has, because he doesn't have a whole lot of elite corners, right? Byron Murphy was pretty good. We're patching it up with Stephon Gilmore, but against man coverage, Jordan Love was 5 for 12 with 41 yards. And I think we're getting a thing here where I know Matt LaFleur said it made him sick about all the questions about not having, people saying he doesn't have a wide receiver one and we do things by committee and we got a bunch of good players. But, man, it really helps to have a Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson in spots like this that can win one-on-one. And I don't think the Packers have that guy. Obviously, Christian Watson's hurt. Romeo Doubs is decent. Jaden Reed, I'm just going to skip to most disappointing. Jaden Reed here, 4 targets, 1 catch, 6 yards, had a drop on an early big play in the first quarter, and 43.2 receiving grade versus man coverage this year. And I like Jaden Reed a lot. I think he's a really good player. I think he can do a lot of things. He's very versatile, but you have to win one-on-one when the situation, comes in front of you. And Brian Flores challenged these Packers wide receivers. And for the most part, I think from 3 quarters of the game at least, they really didn't have a whole lot of answers. And I just start to wonder when, and I know we're going to talk about in the offseason their needs being interior offensive line and further improvement in the secondary, maybe at corner, but how high is wide receiver on that list, considering Christian Watson's injuries and the fact that the rest of these guys are solid but not elite players?
One, I want to go back to the Brian Flores, and something that I love about Flores is sort of the point that you made there with how often he blitzes. And obviously the passing grade versus the blitz is going to be a little bit lower than when there's not blitzes there. But I think a underrated aspect of how aggressive Brian Flores is not just the fact that it works when he pressures. It's that then when you don't pressure them, you get a little bit of the seeing ghost thing. Not necessarily in this game. Like, Love had a couple of plays where that could have been the case, but overall pretty good passing grade when he was not blitzed. But you're really just hoping for maybe that one or two plays when you don't blitz for them to just panic a little bit. And they go, all right, somebody's behind me, like somebody's coming up behind me, and nobody's there because that person's actually in coverage somewhere. And then you're panicking a little bit, and then you're not reading the pocket the way that you need to. So Flores has been incredible. He's done an awesome job as a defense coordinator here for this team. Most impressive, I'll go with Sam Darnold. I think there were a lot of things to be impressed with this Minnesota Vikings team, but I am going to go with Sam Darnold. I think that people might be shocked about that given his overall PFF grade, but I still think it was strong. And again, you can't think of PFF grades necessarily like grades in school. Like a 69.3, like that's a solid grade. And he wasn't perfect in this one. He had a turnover-worthy play. He had 2 big-time throws, though. And what I liked about Sam Darnold, 21 first downs in this game. The only quarterback who had more first downs this week was Joe Burrow, and that, as we know, every single Cincinnati game is all on Joe Burrow's shoulders no matter what, and he even got to go to overtime, so that numbers inflated a little bit there. So just a ton of first downs, getting first downs with his arm, trusting Sam Darnold to be the one to move the chains. I thought that continued to be impressive in a close divisional matchup that meant a ton, and I loved seeing what we saw afterwards with him coming into the locker room and the team just celebrating. Like, it felt like they won the Super Bowl, right? And they just believe so much in Sam Darnold. We talked about it before on this show. I don't think that guy is leaving the building. I don't think he's getting out of Minnesota. I think that now we are going to talk about what happens with J.J. McCarthy. And I don't think they're going to be quick to trade J.J. McCarthy this offseason. I think that if they're smart, they will understand that why would we trade J.J. when we don't have to? So they're probably going to sign Sam Darnold to a, I don't know, 3-4-ish year deal. It's not going to be the Baker Mayfield deal. He's going to get more money than Baker Mayfield. But, like maybe like a 4-year deal or something like that. And then you've still got J.J. McCarthy for next year of Sam Darnold. And if he plays fantastic, okay, then great. Then you're trading J.J. McCarthy next offseason. And if Sam Darnold signs the big contract, then he falls flat on McCarthy on the roster. So I think that that's probably the way that we're going to go about things here with Minnesota. But my most disappointing is an area that I'm definitely worried about with the Packers moving forward, and that is their lack of pass rush. It's not been great from a pass rush year outside of, Edgerrin Cooper, and Devontae Wyatt's been playing well as well. I want to give those guys their flowers, and they played well even in this game. But like Rashawn Gary and just a lot, mainly him. I mean, I mainly look at Gary and it's like, man, it's got to be way more impactful. He is on pace for his lowest pass rush win percentage in the last 4 years, his lowest pass rush grade in the last 4 years, and I believe his lowest total pressures over the last 4 years. He's got to be so much better for you moving forward. And I just think the pass rush in general this year from the Packers, and specifically in this game, was not good enough. They need an impactful pass rush presence on this team, and maybe they will go about drafting one of those players, but man, they got a lot of names on this defensive line. It's just not showing up the way that you need it to. So to me, the Packers' lack of pass rush, given all the names that they have on this defensive line, and in particular Rashawn Gary, has been disappointing this year and was disappointing once again in this game.
Yeah, I think combining those two things that you just mentioned with Sam Darnold and the lack of a pass rush, I thought even as plays were kind of lengthening and he wasn't quite getting to his first read right away, I thought he was really calm in the pocket and really getting to his second and third read, and when he needed to improvise, he improvised very, very well. So, I mean, Darnold continues to prove it. I'm with you. And I think for J.J. McCarthy, as young as he is, and he's still very talented, I think it could work better for him in the long run, honestly. Because, if you give Darnold a 4-year contract, how these things go. 2 years of it will be guaranteed, and then see where it goes from there.
Right.
I think the Vikings have all the leverage in the world here. I think with McCarthy sitting back there learning in this system, he's 21 years old right now. I don't think there's any issue. I mean, why not? We've seen the Packers do it with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. We've seen the Falcons try to do it with Michael Penix for a little bit longer. But no, I think they're in a great situation, and I'm with you. I think I wouldn't let Darnold out the door with the way he's playing.
Can't do it. Dolphins-Browns. Dolphins keep themselves in the hunt with Snoop Huntley at quarterback here, 20-3. Final score in this one. Top 5 graded players for the Miami Dolphins. Linebacker Tyrell Dodson at the top of the list with an 84.4. Cornerback Jalen Ramsey an 80.3. Safety Jordan Poyer a 79.9. Edge rusher Emmanuel Agua with a 76.0. Linebacker Jordan Brooks 74.1. And then Tyler Huntley, top graded player on the Dolphins, playing for Tua Tagovailoa, who was out of this game. 88.4 on Cleveland side of things. Edge rusher Myles Garrett, no surprise there at the top of the list, an 89.2. Safety Rodney McLeod with a 76.5. Linebacker Devin Bush, a 75.5. Guard Joel Bitonio with a 74.3. Safety Ronnie Hickman Jr. with a 70.6. And then Dorian Thompson Robinson, DTR, with a 57.3 PFF grade. Here, what's the stat that told the story, Dalton?
Okay, so I've been pretty critical of the Dolphins secondary and their coverage unit this year, right? And I think we've seen them not play very well for most of the year. If they didn't play well in this game, we would have had a serious problem against Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and obviously Jerry Jeudy's been playing well, but just where the Browns' offense is at. If they didn't play well in this game, I don't know when they were going to. Luckily, season-high 80.6 coverage grade as a team, held DTR to 3.6 yards per attempt. Terrell Dodson, who's a recent newcomer at linebacker with an interception, 3 forced incompletions also as a unit. Okay, cool. The defense, the one time where they just took a good matchup and they played really well through it, and their secondary played well. If they can do it again next week against the Jets, I don't know who will be playing quarterback or what we're doing down there in New York, but They do have to go on the road. They do have to go in likely cold weather. They're going to need their secondary to step up next week. They did this week in a favorable matchup. They've got a little bit tougher matchup, one that they struggled with last time that they played them in Miami with the Jets. If they can do that again, they have a shot to make the playoffs. So that's just really the biggest thing for me is, okay, in maybe the easiest matchup in football right now, their coverage unit went out and played the way they should have.
I think the Browns in the red zone is the big stat that told the story here for me, because 20-3, obviously a 17-point win for the Dolphins. You want to give them their kudos, but it was really just the Browns. Feels like once again this season, sorry, Tyler, our producer, just did not look like they were an NFL team compared to the team that they were playing. Now, not in every aspect, but in the ones that are pivotal towards putting points on the scoreboard, they struggled. 0 for 3 in the red zone in this game. Dolphins were 2 for 2 in the red zone. And to me, being able to capitalize on how you play in the red area was the reason why this game was the way that it was. And so if we're taking this category literally of the stats that told the story, it's the fact that the Browns got in the red zone 3 times and they were 0 for 3, and the Dolphins got in the red zone 2 times and they were 2 for 2. There you go. 20-3. That's the score. That's how we get to the point that we're at. So obviously, I don't think Dorian Thompson-Robinson did enough to win this game. Again, I go back to the fact that, if Jameis Winston isn't playing because he legitimately has a shoulder injury, like, okay, that's fine. But if you're trying to play Dorian Thompson-Robinson over Jameis Winston because you want to win football games, well, that's a pretty poor decision. My most impressive in this game is the guy that continues to be the most impressive for the Cleveland Browns no matter what is going on, and that is Myles Garrett. He had 2 sacks in this game, and now he is the only player in NFL history with 14-plus sacks in the last 4 years. 4 consecutive seasons, he has had 14 sacks or more. Just unbelievably consistent production no matter what is going on around him. And at times, you remember, a couple years ago, the interior defensive line of this team was absolutely terrible, and yet Myles Garrett continue to eat. There have been times, obviously, where right now the offense is terrible and there's not a lot going on in the offense, and the defense has to hold up their end of the bargain every single week, and Myles Garrett eats. They've got tight ends on his side. He's going up against great left tackles and right tackles or whoever it is. Running backs trying to trip him or chip him. He's getting triple teamed, whatever it is. Myles Garrett still eats. And it's going to bring up some very interesting conversations this offseason because, they restructured Deshaun Watson's contract. And as far as I could tell, it doesn't really change things. It basically makes it where, okay, he's cuttable in like 2 years, where maybe it would have been a little bit more difficult. But Myles Garrett, at least the reports have said, he's not interested in any sort of a rebuild. So I don't know if the Browns, maybe thankfully for the Browns, they don't even have the option to do that with Deshaun Watson. So maybe they just have to go all in. But to me, we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations this offseason about how available Myles Garrett really is for a contending team. Because I think there is a non-zero chance that Garrett is playing his last year for Cleveland, given how they have failed him for many, many years throughout his NFL career. And I think that he wants to go win. So that's my most impressive, is that he is just continuing to get it done. What about your most impressive? Who do you got?
Look, it's Tyler Huntley. You just mentioned he was the Dolphins' highest graded player.
Gotta be.
He came out, 22 of 26, 225 yards, passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, 88.4 grade, like you mentioned. He just managed this offense the way that he was supposed to. The Dolphins didn't run the ball very well at all. He was actually their leading rusher with 52 yards, and I think we have to give credit where it's due here for the fact that the Dolphins are still in the playoff race, and Tyler Huntley's made 4 starts this year, okay? They're 2-2 in those starts, just like they're 6-6 with Tua. 2 weeks' notice, he comes in. He gets claimed in September off waivers. 2 weeks later, he's got to start on Monday Night Football against the Titans. They lose that game, but he beat New England. He wins this game. There was a game against the Colts where he had the game tied in the third quarter, and then he got hurt. They might have won that game if he had played the entire way. I think Tyler Huntley deserves some credit here for coming in. Like I mentioned, when he came in and made his first start, on 2 weeks' notice. He's barely been on this team at all. He doesn't know the system. Clearly, I think in this game, he ran this system better than he had in his first 3 starts. I thought he was very in control of the offense, getting the ball where Mike McDaniel wanted him to get it to, but he was really good in this game. He was. I mean, the grades show it, but I would argue he was the best player on the field. He managed the situation well, and the fact that he won this game, I know it's the Browns, and I know the Browns are struggling, but really important, right? I mean, it's realistic that the Dolphins could make the playoffs. They're next in line right after the Broncos, and if maybe the Carson Wentz Chiefs or what have you go and beat Denver for any reason, the Dolphins are next in line, and all they got to do is beat the Jets, and I think that's a big credit to what Huntley did in this game and what was still kind of, when you think about it, a high-pressure environment considering the stakes. And then most disappointing for me, the Browns' offense just is what it is. They've scored 30 points in the last 4 games altogether. It is. I mean, I know Myles Garrett doesn't want to go through the rebuild, but it's what they need. I think the way they did the Watson restructure is that we pretty much know that they're cutting him after next year. I'm pretty sure that's right, and they're still going to have to eat something like $70 million in dead cap.
Right, right.
But so be it. I mean, you're not going anywhere with them. I think the Garrett part is interesting, not only for the fact if Garrett does or doesn't want to be there, but the level of return you could still get for prime Myles Garrett. I think that's, at least 2 first-round picks?
I would think that somebody's giving you 2 first-round picks for Myles Garrett.
A contender getting Myles Garrett could change the whole power structure of the league if it were to happen. I mean, imagine if Detroit just forked over 2 or 3 first-round picks and said, okay, we have Garrett and Hutchinson, good luck. Or any of these teams, the Rams get another guy with a young roster. If you had Garrett and Jared Verse out there, or somebody, if the Bills get Von Miller's contract off the books and they go, I mean, I think there's plenty of options. If he said he wanted out, he would be one of the most coveted trade pieces, I think, of all time, honestly, with as good as he still is. This is prime, one of the best pass rushers we've ever seen. And if he's on the trade market, it becomes maybe the story of the offseason.
I agree. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Most disappointing for me is Denzel Ward. He's, in my opinion, one of the better quarterbacks that we have in the league, but he struggled in this game. Left the game with a shoulder injury, so I want to make sure that I note that as well. But before he did, 47.7 coverage grade, 4 targets, 4 catches allowed, 57 yards receiving, and 3 first downs allowed. So he was up against Tyreek Hill for a lot of it, and he just there was really one play where he was able to play it tight, but then the other 2 plays where he gave up the first down, I mean, he just didn't play the coverage as well as he needed to. So Ward, I think, just struggled in this game, and if Ward's struggling in the game, it's going to be tough for your defense no matter what. So I think that's a disappointing one for me before he went out with injury. Let's turn back the clock a little bit. Let's go to Thursday night football here. Seahawks at Bears. Seahawks win the game 6-3. Thrilling.
Burner. Absolute burner.
Barn burner.
Yep.
Hope you bet the under. The top 5 graded Seattle Seahawks in this game. Defensive tackle Leonard Williams, who's having a good year, 81.2 overall grade. Offensive tackle Abraham Lucas with a 79.2. Running back Zach Charbonnet, 78.9. Linebacker Tyson Knight with a 77.3. Boye Mafe with a 74.0. And then Geno Smith with a 45.1. Not a great game for Geno Smith. From the Chicago Bears side of things, Kyler Gordon, a 92.4. Edge rusher Montez Sweat, a 76.5. Wide receiver DJ Moore, a 74.6. Cornerback Jalen Johnson, a 71.7. Safety Kevin Byard with a 71.0. And then Caleb Williams, a 59.1. I'll jump into my stat that told the story first before we hear yours, because it is something that you've talked about a couple of times throughout this season. The Bears' first down offense is just horrible. And in this game in particular, it was you'll never win. You'll never win with the offense being like this. Negative 0.366 EPA per play on first down. That you are starting in such a negative every single drive when that's the case. No wonder they only scored 3 points, honestly. 29.5 passing grade on first down. Only 12 passing yards on first down against Seattle. You'll never win. You're just never going to win football games if you are that. If you told me that you had 12 passing yards and you won the game, it's because those 12 passing yards were just pivotal, and it's because you were running the ball so phenomenally on 1st and 10 that it really didn't even matter. You were getting like 7-8 yards a clip on 1st and 10. That's the only way that whatever happens. And the Bears run game isn't good enough to boast those kinds of stats. So something that we've just got to fix going into next year, whether it's the majority of Caleb problem, whether it's an offensive coordinator problem, whether it's just an offensive philosophy problem, whatever it is, the first couple of drives for the Bears and first down in particular, like it's just got to be better out of the gate. They've got to be way more confident out of the gate. First quarter, first drive, first play. It's got to be so much better. The Bears have to be tone setters on offense next year, because they certainly have not been this year. And that's what just absolutely bit them on Thursday Night Football, is just not being able to move the football on first down.
Yeah, I think, look, mine is it's going to stay with the Bears offense, and it's the stat that's been thrown around. I think Next Gen threw it out there first, and then I kind of dug into more of it. One completion for Caleb Williams in this game that went at least 7 yards in the air. One. And it wasn't until the Romadunze completion, the diving catch he made with Caleb rolling to his right on the very last drive of the game. There's, I could go on and on about it. I'll give you the numbers I have. There's that 16 completions for Caleb in this game. 8 of them were screens. 3.58 average time to throw on non-screen passes. 7 sacks he took, and we only charged 1 of them to the offensive line, and a 64.6 passing grade this year on 10-plus yard throws, the lowest by any quarterback with 70 attempts. It just further emphasizes the fact, just like we mentioned with with the Jets just having a complete leadership void, that's where the Bears are. They have to get these hires right. They just have to, and every team has to get every hire right. I'm aware of that, but this one especially, after for the 4th time in a row with Grossman, Trubisky, Fields, and now Caleb, where they've had a head coach fired after the rookie quarterback, first-round rookie's first season. It's dysfunctional. The offense is dysfunctional. The defense played well, and it really didn't matter. That's where we're at. The Bears are the Bears, and we're just waiting for the offseason. And I think if they don't get this hire right, especially after the relatively good process from Ryan Poles of trading, away the Bryce Young pick and then getting the Caleb pick and everything that happened, and we thought, man, they have 2 top 10 picks and everything's going to be great, and the Bears have all this stuff. And the complete lack of structure and leadership has led to this, has led to Caleb Williams throwing screens for an entire game and just having no real leadership or any guidance in this. That's where we're at. The fact that a team with Caleb Williams and all these weapons in the Bears offense being relatively healthy loses a game 6-3 at home. It's really it's hard to watch. This was maybe the hardest game to watch of the entire season, I thought.
Most impressive for me, I'll highlight Jalen Johnson in this game. Only allowed 1 catch, so I thought he played a pretty good game. So I'll give the Bears a little bit of a positive there. Most disappointing for me is the Bears' offensive line. I hate to make this all about the Bears. I guess I didn't mean to. Pass blocking grade below 40 for both Matt Pryor and Coleman Shelton. So I think that those guys are certainly the most disappointing along the offensive line, and they played the most poorly. But honestly, the most disappointing for me is the NFL scheduling. And I know, like, Thursday Night Football, it's weird that I'm saying this here. I should probably be saying this for the Christmas Day games, but I know that Netflix had a bunch of people that watched the football games that were on Christmas Day, and we had the Saturday games and we had the Thursday Night Football game. Like, the product is bad. Like, people watch it because it's the NFL, but like the football product is bad. Every coach will tell you, like, they hate the Thursday night games. They hate the short week stuff. Like, it impacts guys because they're trying to deal with injury, and you don't get as much time to game plan. You don't get as much time to know your opponent as well as you want to. It's an accelerated schedule, all that kinds of stuff. 8 out of 15 games that we played so far this week, because we haven't played Monday Night Football yet, 8 of them were blowouts, 14 points or more. And then I'm talking about it here. This game, this is a Thursday Night Football game. They scored 9 points. They scored 9 total points. Why is that what we want? I guess I'm sort of just yelling into the void, because if the NFL could have an NFL game on every single day, it would, because it do insane numbers, because people care about football so much. And obviously we love that people care about football so much, because it's the reason why people are watching and listening to the show. But I hated the scheduling. I hated the 2 games on Christmas because it was on a Wednesday. I hated the Thursday Night Football game being this late in the season. We're still doing Thursday Night Football. I wish they'd cut off Thursday Night Football like after Week 14. Like Week 14 is the last Thursday Night Football game. Now, again, I'm speaking into the void because there's no way they're going to shorten their deal with Amazon to have those games. So it's never going to happen. But if they actually wanted the best product and the best fairness for the teams to prepare the way that they needed to, you can go to Saturday games. I don't totally hate Saturday games. Saturday games are okay for me. But it's the Wednesday games. And what is it, all 4 teams? Didn't they play 3 games in 11 days? That's crazy at this point in the season. And I think the product on the field, just absolute blowouts on Christmas Day because of it. The teams that weren't up to par of the Chiefs and the Ravens had no chance in these games. Anyways, that's sort of my rant that I would go on eventually, but that was I really was not a fan of the scheduling with them trying to cram it in on Christmas Day, and I feel like the players, the product, the preparation, everything suffered because of it, but it's not going to change.
No, I get it. Listen, there might be a change. If people were as loud about that as they were about the first round of the college playoff, then we might get somewhere, honestly. But, I guess the NFL can just turn on a 40-0 game or a 6-3 game and be just fine with it and play.
We're all going to watch.
What was it? The Chiefs?
I think that's both the gift and the curse is that we're always going to watch.
Sure, absolutely, I'm going to watch. But I'll tell you what, I'm gonna shut it off when it comes time. I'll tell you right now, Ravens Texans, I shut it off halfway through the third quarter. there was nothing else to see there. But
31-2, man. And I get blowouts happen all all the time. Sure. Again, I understand a blowout can happen any Sunday with full preparation, but again, I don't think there's any player, I don't think there's any coach, I don't think there's anybody who has anything to do with the planning of this game who would go, oh yeah, Wednesday game, yeah, we're cool with that. Oh, Thursday night, Thursday game, yeah, we love those.
And that would be the argument, is that it's a competitive disadvantage. I mean, how, right. Like going from a Saturday to a Wednesday, how in the world are the Steelers supposed to prepare for a Steve Spagnuolo in 3 days? Like, that's not a good luck.
You can't. You basically just have to go back to your own tape and try to evaluate yourself, and you're not doing a ton of scouting of the other team that you're playing. Right. Because you're just trying to get right.
Yeah, so, I'm with you. For me, I'll start most disappointing on this side, just both offenses. I mean, it was ugly. We've talked about the Bears a lot, but if you take out screen passes, it was on the Seahawks side too. Half the completions in this game on both sides were screens. It was ugly. You take out all the screens, Seattle had 4.5 yards of play, and the Bears had 2.5. I mean, 0 points. Not just the 9 points scored total, 0 points scored in the second half. We saw 9 drives, and it was 7 punts, an interception, and a fumble. And the fumble was the most exciting part because Kyler Gordon, ended up being down by contact. But that was the most exciting part, is going and seeing him score, and then it got called back anyway, which just exemplifies the whole thing. Both teams, for various reasons, the Bears because they have no structure, Seattle because they have nothing left in the interior and the offensive line. Neither offense could function. And you know what? My most impressive, because I have nothing else here to go with, give me Seattle's punter, Michael Dixon. That's where we're going with this.
Yeah, baby.
So there we go. 6 punts in this game. 3 of them inside the 20. The other 3 were at least 56 yards. Positive grade on 5 out of 6 of them. 92.2 punting grade this season. Highest of his career, second best in the NFL. We've got a punter having a career season, a career day on a career season, and you know what? That's about the only good thing I saw in this game.
Broncos, Bengals. Let's talk about this one next.
No 6-3 here.
No 6-3 here. This is a thriller. Cincinnati wins this one in overtime, 30-24, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Cincinnati needs to win against Pittsburgh this week. They need Miami to lose against the Jets, and they more importantly need the Broncos to somehow lose to the Chiefs, playing their backups. Not sure we get that. But anyways, top 5 graded players for the Kansas City Chiefs here in this game as we break this one down. Linebacker Jermaine Pratt with a 90.1 overall grade. Wide receiver T. Higgins an 82.6. Offensive tackle Orlando Brown Jr. 75.0. Tight end Mike Gesicki a 73.9. Edge rusher Joseph Osai with a 73.8. Joe Burrow. 93.6 overall grade in this one. On Denver's side, edge rusher DeAndre Tillman with a 91.3. Defensive tackle John Franklin Meyer with a 91.1. Wide receiver Marvin Mims Jr. an 88.5. Offensive tackle Garrett Bowles with a 79.7. Offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey a 79.3. And then Bo Nix a 71.4. Lots to talk about in this one. So that told the story. What do we got?
We have Joe Burrow. That's simple. We have Joe Burrow. And we have Joe Burrow putting up his career high 93.6 overall grade, the highest of his career.
Wow.
Yeah. The best.
Didn't realize that.
We saw the best Joe Burrow we could possibly see. And I mean, the run he's on and what he's trying to do carrying this team. Trevor, the processing, the all-22 tape of Joe Burrow in this game is even crazier than watching it live. Because the level of processing, it's at a Peyton Manning level type of processing for him the way he sees the field. We usually talk about like stable, unstable being that cutoff of 2.5 seconds, right? With Burrow, it's even quicker than that. Let me give you his stats on throws that he let go of in 2 seconds or less. I'm taking the extra half off of it. 27 for 31 for 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an 89.7 passing grade. On 2 seconds or less, not 2. Usually I'm doing this with 2.5. I'm cutting that part out. The speed at which he sees defenses and knows where he wants to go with the football and accurately gets it there is honestly, it's better than anybody. And I know Allen's having a great year and he can do all the freak things, and Lamar can do all the freak things, and he's having his best year as a passer. But this is a Peyton Manning level of football IQ and processing and what he can do from the pocket. It is absolutely unreal. In 2 seconds or less this season, for the whole year, it's crazy. 90.2 passing grade, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And one of those picks wasn't even his fault. It's just silly at this point. The fact that you can have a quarterback this good and you're most likely going to miss the playoffs, it's hard to believe. Because remember before the season we were messing around and I said during our Bengals preview, 5,000 yards for Burrow? I believe he needs 352 next week against the Steelers to hit that. There's a chance he has a 5,000-yard, 40-touchdown, 90-something grade season, and they're going to miss the playoffs. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I want to jump in there because I tweeted this after the game. You know, I tweeted a meme of the guy standing up and saying something controversial, and it was, we've heard for so many weeks now, like, well, if the Bengals were better, if their record was better, if they were going to make the playoffs, Joe Burrow would be right there for MVP. The Bengals being bad should help his case for MVP. Why does it hurt it? Them being as bad as they are should actually help Joe Burrow's case to win MVP. Now, the people that responded to me, and I'm not necessarily saying that they're wrong, but the people with an actual argument against me were saying, or against that, were saying like, well, if the Bengals defense was better, and therefore if their record was better, he would not have as many stats as he would. Like, he wouldn't lead the league in touchdowns thrown. He wouldn't lead the league in passing yards. But my argument for why Joe Burrow should be right there for MVP, yes, obviously the stats are part of that, but that's not the only reason why. If the defense were better and you were to take away some of those stats, Joe Burrow would still be playing, like you said, like Peyton Manning. He'd still be playing at an assassin-like level. And that's something that you sort of have to look at the efficiency numbers, those metrics, and you just got to watch the tape to watch how well this dude is playing the quarterback position. So to me, it's less about the volume stats, and it's more about just they put everything on his plate. There's not a lot to help him. There's not a ton of play action. There's not a ton of motion. It's basically Joe. Read the defense before the snap, know exactly where to go with the ball, exactly when to get it out of your hands, and exactly where to put it. And he does almost every single time. That's why his season's unbelievable. That's why he's an MVP, because without Joe Burrow, this team still has a chance to make the playoffs. Without Joe Burrow, they'd have won 3 games this year. 3. And he is, I mean, his wins, the way that he is playing, his wins above average metric, I don't know if it's the highest this season, but it feels like it should, again, be right there with some of the best that we're talking about with MVP. So that was the only reason why I was saying that. It's like, oh, we go like, oh man, can you imagine if the Bengals were right there to make the playoffs, or if they were in the playoffs, we'd be talking about him as an MVP. We should be talking about him as an MVP anyways. So that told the story for me. I'm going to go on the opposite side of the coin. It's actually the Bengals defense, but it's in the worst way. A 52.2 overall grade from the Bengals defense in this game. No category. So overall, run defense, pass rush, coverage, no category did they have a grade above 60 in this game. So once once again, this was a game that was defined by the Bengals defense and inability to stop teams for 60 minutes because Bo Nix was not playing great in this game. Outside of 2 or 3 throws that were really impressive, it was not a great wire-to-wire Bo Nix game. But they were still in the game when it was all said and done because they could still move the football because of the Bengals defense. So to me, the stat that told the story, you look at how well Joe Burrow was playing in this game. Should have been a somewhat easy win, but it wasn't because the Bengals can't play defense this year. So that's sort of my stat that told the story there with the Bengals defense. Do you have any more things on Joe Burrow or the Bengals defense before we do
your question on the wins above replacement? So Lamar Jackson is second with 3.6. Joe Burrow's the one guy ahead of him with 4.8.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
That's ridiculous. That's beyond ridiculous when you've got everyone else bunched together. Obviously, it's usually a decimal point kind of game here. Joe Burrow ahead of Lamar Jackson in WAR by more than an entire win. I mean, that's just – I think you're right. In the argument of most valuable player and who is most valuable – because how many – let's just say we put an average quarterback on the Ravens. Probably still somewhere around a wild card team, right? With Derrick Henry. Actually, it's essentially the same team as Tennessee had with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, right? Pretty good defense, Derrick Henry, blah blah blah. Okay, Josh Allen's the other one where I go, I don't think they would win a ton of games without him. But Burrow, this team that they wouldn't win anything.
They're winning 3 games.
He has to play at a special. I'm not sure they win a single game. He has to play at a special level just for them to win ball games like this. I mean, it's crazy. No, Burrow, if they do make the playoffs, we have a really fun argument of valuable versus obviously, and his stats are incredible too. It's not like the passing stats aren't there, but I think you'd have a terrific argument if they made the playoffs. I think you have a really good one even if he doesn't. I mean, look at, again, it's to the point of I don't know that they would win a single game without him. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. I mean, New England's got 2 wins, so they'd win a game. But again, I think they're a 3-win team without Joe Burrow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Most disappointing, real quick, and the guys that Burrow attacked, he didn't go at Pat Surtain a whole lot, and rightfully so. That's one of the best corners in football. But Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan, it's a rough one. They were the victims of the Burrow hot streak here, especially with T. Higgins playing the way he played. They combined to allow 17 catches, 212 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Look, I think that's kind of what you're going to do against the Broncos. You're not going to throw at Surtain all night. That's not a thing. If he's shadow and chase, it is what it is. Big night for T. Higgins to have the night he did against the other guys in the lineup. So now the Broncos, their backs are against the wall. And I know, it's at home and they get to play the Chiefs, probably play the Chiefs backups, Carson Wentz or whoever's going to be in there. But we saw it with the Colts yesterday. Don't take it for granted. Don't ever take it for granted. Those guys are professionals, and you know darn well they'll take some pride if they knock you out of the playoffs.
Can't take anything for granted. I think that's what this week has taught us. Most disappointing for me, Alex Kappa in this game really struggled. 2 sacks allowed. He's beaten by defenders 8 times, 6 pressures allowed, 4.8 pass blocking grade in this one. So he was the most disappointing along the offensive line. But then for the most impressive, I'll go back to the Bengals offensive line. Now shout out to Orlando Brown Jr. 84 total snaps in this one, 0 sacks, only 2 pressures allowed. And he said that he was playing on a broken leg, so he was there. There was a video of him, yelling when he was going back into the tunnel or coming out of the tunnel, and he talked about that after the game. I'll read the quote here. I was really emotional there at the end of the game, obviously, when he was saying that he was doing all this with a broken leg. My fibula has been broken in 2 separate spots. That's what I've been dealing with all season. It's an extremely unique injury. To get specific, my fibula and tibia are fused together because I grew so quickly as a child on both legs. So it's considered a weight-bearing bone. It's something that I've been having to obviously deal with, and the reason why I've missed some time, among other things, it's been around that leg. So for him to play well in this one and have a lot of pride being out there, shout out to Orlando Brown Jr. as my most impressive.
You had 2 guys. You had Brown playing on one leg, and then at least for the first half, you had Amarius Mims playing with one hand. He was playing with a club on his hand and then had to come out because it was bothering him too. So, I mean, just the amount of adversity this Bengals team has gone through is just really something.
Cardinals, Rams. Rams win it. Get in the driver's seat of that division. 13-9 final score in this one. Low scoring game, but one that the Rams will take every single time. Wide receiver Puka Nacua was the top-graded player for the Rams with a 90.3 overall grade. Linebacker Omar Speights with an 82.8. Edge rusher Byron Young with a 76.9. Defensive tackle Bobby Brown with a 72.7. Guard Steve Avila with a 69.5. And then Matthew Stafford a 72.9 in this one. Arizona's top-graded player is safety Jalen Thompson, a 91.2. Cornerback Garrett Williams with an 86.1. Tight end Trey McBride an 85.8. Edge rusher Mac Wilson with an 83.1. Corner Max Melton with an 80.7, and then Kyler Murray in this game an 81.6 overall grade. What was your stat that told the story here, Dalton?
The Cardinals should have won this game, and this is my example of the week of not finishing drives. Look, they went 1 for 4 in the red zone. They had the touchdown early in the second half, the first drive of the second half, but the extra point was blocked, which actually ended up playing a big factor later. It'd be a lot different if it was a 3-point game than a 4-point game. So that's one error. An early turnover on downs where they had James Conner lined up at fullback on 4th and 1, a look that they have shown before this season, and the Rams were ready for it and stopped them. Kicked a field goal early in the fourth quarter, and then obviously the interception at the end of the game. I know there's been the blame game kind of flying around on did Kyler throw the ball too high? Did McBride not get his head around? Either way, what happened, and they didn't finish drives, and they wind up losing a game where they outgained the Rams by almost 140 yards, and they also had their highest graded defensive game of the season. We know it's a Cardinals defense that has obviously struggled. They've done some good things this year, but for the most part, they're not considered obviously one of the elite defenses. So when you get your best defensive game of the year, you have almost 400 yards of total offense, you should win the game, but go 1 for 4 in the red zone, and this is what happens when you don't finish drives, obviously, especially when you have 2 occasions where you came away with nothing.
Yeah, my stat that told the story is the same as yours. I think it has to be because this was really what held the Cardinals back from winning this game. So as much as I'd like to be different on these, I can't be because, like you mentioned, 1 for 4 in the red zone, and it's just sort of a culmination of the Cardinals season. Like there are times when it looks really good, and there are times when it sputters, and far too inconsistent of a season, I think, for the Cardinals. And to me, that's what they really got to focus on going forward and into next year. Now, it's tough to just look at a whiteboard and say, hey, what are the areas we need to improve? Consistency. Well, obviously, you want to be consistent every year, no matter what your roster looks like, no matter what your expectations are. So it's not like it's anything new. It's not like they're going out and signing consistency in free agency. It's not like they're drafting consistency in the top 20 of the first round of this upcoming draft. That's sort of something that it's on the coaching staff, it's on the leaders of this team. But the Cardinals, like we talked about with the Jags, but I think the Cardinals are an even better football team. They've got talent. They really do. We saw that with them being 6-4 midway through the year going into the bye week, and they just have really played below the level we know they're capable of. I don't even want to call it bad. It's just below the level that we know that they're capable of down the stretch through the last 8 weeks of the season. So 7 weeks of the season, excuse me. So it's been something that is sort of disappointing to watch, but there's certainly reason to believe, in my opinion, that the best version of the Cardinals is coming up in 2025. So even though a lot of people didn't necessarily expect them to make the playoffs anyways, they're not going to make the playoffs now. It is going to be a paramount year for them to really take a next step forward and get into the postseason next season. My most impressive and most disappointing, I think it's offensive line both ways. Most impressive for me is the Rams pass blocking, 82.5 team pass blocking grade, 0 sacks allowed, only 6 pressures allowed. Now, the Cardinals defensive line, not the best in the NFL, but still, to be able to come up and play that big against a divisional opponent with so much on the line, really, really great to see from the Rams offensive line, which has been playing better as of late as they've gotten a lot of guys more healthy in this game. And then most disappointing on the other side of things, it's the Cardinals pass blocking, 63.7 pass blocking grade for the Cardinals, 3 sacks, then an added sack from Kyler Murray, which was not credited to the offensive line. It was more of a quarterback sack, which, by the way, that's a good thing to note is that, hey, not all sacks are on the offensive line. Sometimes sacks are a quarterback stat. That's why we track them a little bit differently here. So it just was not the best day for the Cardinals pass blocking unit. It could have been better. It's been a pretty ferocious young defensive line for the Rams, but opposite ends of the spectrum there with most disappointing and most impressive with the 2 offensive lines here in this game. What about you? Most impressive and most disappointing?
I'll take a guy on the Cardinals side on defense. I think one of the defensive pieces that they're going to be moving into the future with, and that's their slot corner, Garrett Williams. I think a very versatile player, can play in the slot, play some safety on early downs, can play some deep half for you, but an 85.1 coverage grade in this game. 4 tackles, also had a run stop, 2 pass breakups, got an 85 or better coverage grade in 3 of his last 6 games. I think he's one of of the guys, when you're looking at developing a team in season, you're looking for guys like this who are kind of mid-round picks who can develop into starters, and I think Williams has done that. When you look at kind of the three safety slot kind of guys that they have, Budda Baker, Garrett Williams, and Jalen Thompson, I think they got something to really build this secondary around, especially in the middle of it. They need more help on the outside at corner. They certainly need more help on the defensive line, which didn't play great in this game either. I thought Garrett Williams was really impactful. He was flying all over the field. He's a nice, versatile piece for Jonathan Gannon to work with. And my most disappointing, honestly, I don't think Matt Stafford was particularly great in this game. And you mentioned all the clean pockets, and generally that has meant that he's going to play great because he's clean. He can make all the throws, and we know what he can do, right? But 62.5 clean pocket passing grade in this game and 59.7 over the last 3 games. If they're going to win playoff games and they're going to make some sort of dark horse run here, Stafford had the great game against the Bills, one of the best games we've seen him play, and then it just has kind of shut down since then for some reason. And it looks like, and I think Cooper Kupp also been struggling a little bit lately. Nakua's obviously their number one option now, but I think Matt Stafford, he's got some things to figure out. I think the Rams are going to play the starters this week because there's still some seeding on the line, but they need a little bit better out of him, especially with the pass protection playing as well as it is.
Yeah, but Matthew Stafford's one of those quarterbacks that I'm not really worried about at all. He
figures it out when it matters too. Yeah,
I mean, he could just the snap of a finger just turn into an elite version of what we know Matthew Stafford could be. So, congrats to the Los Angeles Rams, who, it was funny, they didn't clinch the NFC West with their win in this game. They had to wait a little bit for it, but due to the strength of victory tiebreaker, they did clinch the division on Sunday. So congrats to them for clinching the division. Started the season 1-4. So to clinch the division with a week left to go, what an incredible job by the Rams. I think a lot of people, when we looked at the early draft order, like 8 weeks through the season, I think a lot of people looked at the Rams and said, all right, we think that they're going to be a little bit further down. We think they're going to win a lot of football games. But to make the playoffs, still, incredible job by one of the best coaches in the NFL, in Sean McVay there, once again. You got anything else in this game?
Not in this game. Are we rolling back? Right. We rolling back to the other team in LA that made the playoffs this week?
What are we doing the Chargers game?
I think we skipped over Chargers Patriots.
Oh, did we really?
Believe so.
All right, yeah. What do you got? Let's talk about it. Yeah, Chargers Patriots. I don't think we have the top fives for this one because we. Oh wait, no, we do. It's right here.
Don't worry. I wouldn't leave out anybody's top 5. Certainly, especially not in a playoff clinching game. You can't leave it out then.
Can't get anything by you, Dalton. Okay, let's look at the Chargers and the Patriots. Thank you for keeping me on my toes here. Chargers win this game. Another blowout, 40-7. Top 5 graded players for the Los Angeles Chargers: center Bradley Bozeman with an 80.6 overall grade. Safety Tony Jefferson a 74.6. Offensive tackle Rashawn Slater 74.4. Safety Derwin James 72.1. Guard Sam Mustipher with a 71.4 as well. Quarterback Justin Herbert in this one, a 85.4 overall grade. On New England side of things, Sion Takitaki with a 74.5 to lead all players. Offensive tackle Jamontre Jacobs, a 71.6. Wide receiver Pop Douglas, a 71.4. Safety Marte Mapu with a 71.0. And then safety Jalen Hawkins, a 70.8. Drake May on this one, a 52.2 overall grade. So that's told the story here, Dalton. What do you got?
All right, so last week I went on about how great Justin Herbert was under pressure against Denver. This is one where he was hardly under any pressure at all. The Chargers, 90.9 pass blocking grade. Best, certainly, for their season. Third best by any team in any game so far this season. Herbert pressured on just 8 out of 41 dropbacks. When you're getting down into that area of 20% pressure, you're having an elite day in pass protection. And look, Herbert in a clean pocket. Look at those numbers: 23 of 31, 247, 1 big-time throw, 3 touchdowns, 86.9 passing grade. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in football, top 3 or 4 all year. Went in a clean pocket, and he had plenty to work with in this game. It just felt like New England did not have any shot whatsoever of touching him. I mean, their defense just didn't give Drake May really any chance. And I know their offense struggled. This was just about the Chargers going in there. And in scenarios like this, a lot of times coaches kind of say in these clinching scenarios, leave no doubt. There was certainly no doubt from the Chargers, and they left no doubt in pass protection. The Patriots were not touching Justin Herbert in this game.
Yeah, I think that really is the stat that told the story is the Chargers pass protection. But just to not copy you. I think that overall, to me, the stat that told the story is the Patriots' grades. Highest graded player in this game was, I mentioned Sione Takitaki with a 74.5. I mean, when your highest graded player is 74.5, you did not have enough impact on this game, especially when your quarterback's grading it at 52.2. Now the PFF grades are, the be all end all, but they're generally a good indicator of performances, and there were just no impact players, I think, at all. And the scoreboard reflects that 40-7 in this game. This was a game that exposed the Patriots for being the worst roster in the NFL. And they are. They're the worst roster in the NFL, I think, by a wide margin. And unfortunately, going into my most disappointing, a reason for that is their 2024 NFL draft. We talked about how this is a very pivotal draft for the Patriots. I liked the Patriots draft. I liked the wide receivers they picked. I didn't love the offensive linemen that they picked, but I love the fact that they stayed at 3 and took Drake May. I like the wide receivers that they picked. And I thought, okay, at least I think this draft is going to have them going in the right direction, because it was a handful of drafts there where they were not getting a lot of impact out of players that were very Patriots and Bill Belichick specific, and it was not panning out for them. The 2024 NFL draft for the Patriots. Drake May, stud. Love him. Made the right choice by not moving on from number 3. Jalen Polk, unbelievably disappointing. Looks like a shell of what he looked like when he was at Washington. Completely unreliable this year, which is sad, because we're seeing so many other rookies play really well, including a guy they could have had in Ladd McConkey. But I'm not going to focus on that too much, because I thought that Jalen Polk should have been good anyways there for the New England Patriots. Caden Wallace, Layden Robinson, I thought both those guys were overdrafted. I think they played okay at times this season. It's rookie years, offensive linemen, so I think a lot of rookie offensive linemen really struggle no matter what. Javon Baker doesn't have a catch this year. So this draft class was so much lower of an ROI as rookies than I thought was going to be possible for the New England Patriots. And again, they've got to nail it this upcoming draft. And they have the number 1 overall pick. And when I say nail it, I mean not just at number 1 overall. If you could trade back to acquire a lot of extra picks, I'd say do it. I would say do it. And we'll have a lot more of those conversations moving forward. But yeah, I think that this draft class overall has just been really disappointing for the Patriots.
Yeah, I think the rough stat from there is it's been one floating around. Have you seen the McConkey Jalen Polk stat?
No, but if you have it in front of me, you can read it off.
Ladd McConkey had more yards this week than Polk had the entire season. Jalen Polk has 87 yards and McConkey had 94 in this game.
That's tough.
That's the one that's been floating around there.
I can't be too hindsight about it, because again, I liked McConkey. Don't get me wrong, but I also liked Jalen Polk. Like, I never would have thought Jalen Polk would have been this bad.
Oh no!
And on this Patriots team, I thought Jalen Polk was going to be a 1,000-yard receiver in his rookie year, 800 to 1,000 yards, something like that.
Yeah,
and
I mean the Pats offensively, they have Drake May, and then we have no idea what else. That's pretty good. There's also running back controversies about who's starting and who's not and all that stuff. I mean, we know where the Patriots are at. They have a quarterback, and they need to spend every dollar they have and every draft pick they have to support them, or this could go south real quick. I mean, to be honest, though, the Patriots are kind of having the year we expected them to have. We thought maybe there'd be a little more progress, but we kind of knew this is what they were before the season. Most impressive real quick for me, I'm going to go with a guy actually outside of that top 5 for the Chargers. The 5th overall pick there, Joe Alt, he just plays well every single week. 78.9 pass blocking grade in this game. 1 pressure allowed. He's allowed 1 pressure or fewer in 11 of the 15 games he's played in this season. He's just Mr. Awesome. Consistent. He's already a top 20. He's a top 20 tackle right now. He's probably the 6th or 7th best right tackle in the league right now. And I think, for the statement that Jim Harbaugh wanted to make about how he wanted to build this team, he took obviously Joe Alt when there was a time where he could have taken Malik Neighbors, but he went with the trench play, and it's worked for him. And Joe Alt is just a spectacular football player. I thought Alt, of all the flash and the quarterbacks and all that stuff, I thought Alt was the safest pick in the draft. And this is why. He was just ready to go from day one, and he's been spectacular, especially in pass protection all year. And then a guy he was protecting Justin Herbert from, Keon White, the most disappointing for me in this game. Obviously, I could pick just about anybody for the Patriots, but White's gone a little cold lately. This game, 2 pressures and 22 opportunities, and 53.2 overall grade in his last 4 games. I think he is a building block for the Patriots, but he's kind of lost some steam as the season, I should say, has gone on, and he got off to a really good start. But yeah, I think on that side of the matchup, taking Joe Alt in this year's draft, and Ladd McConkey for that matter in the second round, it's really put the Chargers on a good course to have a nice supplemental offseason to a core that has gotten them to the playoffs, I think, sooner than we thought they would.
Yeah, my most impressive is Ladd McConkey. 10 targets, 8 catches, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game. But even beyond that, just what a year he has had. Most receptions and most receiving yards for a rookie wide receiver in Chargers franchise history. So just an excellent pick. Somebody who was just damn good in college. And, oh, look at that. He's good in the NFL. And that's pretty crazy to think that would be the case. And it is with Ladd McConkey. There we go. Did I miss any other ones?
No. I think that's good. We got the full we got the full slate next week. We got everything because we got the 2 Wednesday games out of the way early. So next week is the last full week, probably the fullest week of the year when you really look at it.
I know. And there's a lot on the line. I'm very excited for it. Anybody who is looking for our recap of the Christmas Day games, we have a one-off video about that we did last week right after the games are over, so you can check that out on PFF's YouTube channel. As always, if you guys enjoyed some of the PFF stats that we brought up here on this show and you want to see them yourself, you can go over to PFF.com. Get yourself a PFF Plus subscription to be able to see all that good stuff. One more week of the regular season to go. As Dalton mentioned, it is going to be wall to wall. It's going to be exciting down to the very end with Sunday Night Football obviously determining the number 1 overall seed in the NFC between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings. So that and so many other games, we're going to find out exactly who's getting into the playoffs, and we're going to find out what those playoff matchups are going to be. I can't wait for it. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Dalton Wasserman saying thank you so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys next week.